Excellent, thank you. So welcome everybody, good morning and welcome to this Economy Overview and Scrutiny panel. Just a reminder for everybody that the meeting is being recorded and is available on the Council's website. If the fire alarm goes off today during the course of the meeting, it will not be a test, and therefore I will ask you to make your way to the emergency exit point, which it actually says David Knight will guide you. So it's probably good if I introduce you to David Knight, who is relatively new to the Scrutiny team. So welcome, David. So, David, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair, apologies, and I apologise if I mispronounce the esteemed elected member's name. Councillor Udall has sent his apologies. He can't be here today, and there is no substitution, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest or party whip from anybody? No? No declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. And David, do we have any public participation?
I've been advised of none, and there doesn't appear to be anybody here.
Excellent, thank you. So we go on to the confirmation of the minutes of the two previous meetings. So the meeting of the 23rd of January, can I have an approver and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Allen, Councillor Birch. And the 13th of March minutes, Councillor Allen and Councillor Birch. Excellent, thank you very much. So we go straight on to item 5, which is the Malvern Hills Science Park. And we have with us today Councillor Adam Kent, who is the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member with responsibility for finance, corporate services and business. We also have with us Alan White, who is the Chief Executive of Malvern Hills Science Park, Gary Woodman, the Assistant Director for Economy, and Scott Riddell, the Senior Project Manager for Growth and Investment. So can I pass over to you, Gary, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Chair. At the March meeting of this panel, Gary and I presented a paper on the development and the evolution of the Worcester 6 Business Park. This paper was intended to give members some history on that site and highlighted some of the successes, but also some of the ongoing challenges with the Worcester 6 site. And today's paper regarding Malvern Hills Science Park has been written along similar lines. The aim is to provide the panel with the park's history, its contribution to the local economy, and the opportunities and some of the factors that will shape its future in supporting innovation and growth across the county, really. As the paper lays out, the park was originally established to build upon the area's heritage in science and technology-based sectors alongside neighbour Kinetic, who were already established. Over the years, various phases have been developed, and the park now provides a home for a wide range of businesses, contributing to the reputation of the Malvern area as a centre of innovation. However, as you may expect, like many science and innovation parks across the UK, the site faces a range of challenges, and in order to give the paper balance, like we did with the Worcester 6 paper, we have been honest in our assessment of what we think these challenges are. I'm delighted to say that we're joined today by Alan White, Chief Executive of the Science Park, and hopefully between Alan, myself, Gary and Councillor Kent, we'll be able to answer any questions and respond to any comments that the panel may have. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Do you want to go through anything first of all, Alan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to, first of all, really express the gratitude on behalf of the Board of the Science Park for the investment that Worcestershire County Council has made in the Science Park over the years. The initiative, which came into being through a joint venture agreement, was funded by Malvern Hills District Council, Worcestershire County Council and the Chamber of Commerce in partnership. And that initial investment has seen a growth of the business from nothing to a site that has 5 phases of development, plans for further phases, and employs up to 400 people from the local economy. A ready reckoner would be that the gross value added of the employees at the Science Park adds something in the region of £22 million per annum to the local economy. So it's a really, really significant return on your investment. Further phases of growth, though, are stymied by things like the cost of construction, land costs, and also infrastructure. At this point, I'd also make another note of thanks to the County Council for the work that you've done opening up the bypass to enable people to get to and from Malvern much better than they used to be able to. So I can count on getting from Malvern Hills Science Park to Junction 6 in 17 minutes now, whereas in 10 years ago I could think, well, it might take me 35 minutes, or it could be a bit open-ended to get to Junction 7. That's made a big difference. And I would encourage any consideration you might have of future infrastructure investment in the area to support its growth, to consider those seriously, because you've already got somewhere that's successful. You can add to that success by further investments in due course. So really, from me, it's and having been Chief Executive of the Science Park now for 16 years, it's a note of thanks to the County Council for the investment that you've made and the patient way you've allowed that business to grow, because patient money can grow, impatient money sometimes can't, because you're moving it around all the time. And I would encourage that patience to remain so that long-term growth can continue. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And Councillor Kent, can I come to you, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, panel. Well, back in the same seat that I occupied previously, to be honest. So, in a previous role, I was also looking after Malvern Hills Science Park, and I remember many of the board meetings. I'm yet to have one of the board meetings, so I'm going to tread cautiously today in terms of the direction and everything else. But suffice to say, I don't think we've talked really about what happens at Malvern Hills Science Park, because it's a hotbed of defence, technical, science and other aspects, and it's an area I think we can grow substantially, that area of the economy within Worcestershire. So we've got, certainly with GCHQ and everything else and Kinetic there's a clear guidance in terms of the companies that are being attracted and the type of high paid jobs that can be brought to the area. Now, I think the Chief Exec touched on the difficulties of viability of further building and us providing buildings for people. But I did have a meeting yesterday, a preliminary meeting with relevant officers, where we're going to be looking at the opportunities that we've got to move some of those things forward in terms of what we can do, and whether that's through ourselves or others. We're going to get onto it straight away and make sure that we can maximise the investments that we've made in it and ensure the best for the residents of Worcestershire and jobs in Malvern, really. But been there before, well aware of the issues. I think it's another site that suffers with post-COVID, really, in terms of the traction of the number of people that come into the office, So I think it's not without issues that it's got to address, but I think before we did a very good tenant survey, I remember, that went through and got a good understanding of what the tenants want. We've got an excellent cafe there. I think Beta Dennis hosted there as well, isn't it, and other areas. So I think there's a lot of potential within the space, but I'm going to be certainly looking over the next few months in terms of what we can do to maximise the return for Worcestershire County Council and get as many high-paying jobs into Malvern as we can.
Excellent, thank you all. Can I open it up to the panel for questions? Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, panel. First question really is you alluded to it about the Golden Triangle, and the reason that area works, it's similar to the sort of Silicon Valley effect, where everything is in one place. You've got the educational facilities, you've got then the training opportunities, and you've got the jobs that link in at the end. Now, Worcestershire as a whole is a relatively rural county, and we've got a number of these companies that operate within the tech industry, especially within defence. We do a lot of defence within Worcestershire. But they tend to be quite dispersed in terms of how they are, in terms of where they are. We don't quite have that area in the same way that other areas of the country do, in particular in London. What more can we do to bring these companies together? So where we've got companies operation in Worcestershire Parkway, we've got companies like Network Innovations in Broadway, we've got the companies on the Malvern Science Park. How can we bring these people together to work collaboratively to ensure that we're getting the best out of our sort of innovations within the area?
So we've had the Growth Hub to this panel before as well. So we work with the Growth Hub team to identify those companies that are in that defence sector. That can be more difficult than you imagine. Obviously, if you're in defence, you don't necessarily want to advertise the fact always. Equally, defence can be part of a company's strategy and not the whole thing. So sometimes, you look at the front of the business and you think, oh, that's providing automotive parts or anything else, but actually a small percentage is defence. But nevertheless, the work we're doing proactively with the Growth Hub goes out and finds those companies and starts to work with them about how they're procuring more defence contracts, what are their ambitions, where they export to. And we have brought them together in the past, not just at the Science Park, but as a collective, and how we then respond. Obviously, links into our neighbouring counties is very important, and we're starting to see the development there of working with MOD, a defence cluster for the West Midlands. So we're also part of that. So we are bringing those, recognising, yes, Silicon Valley, they're probably all in sort of fairly close proximity. Here we're having to work that bit harder to bring that cluster together, but nevertheless it exists and we're supporting it.
Thank you, Gary. Alan, did you want to cover that?
Yes, it's a really good question, and one that we are tackling through the creation of our own connections. If you want businesses to succeed, you require a density of connection. That's the reason why the square mile is so successful in London. Everybody's, they're godparents to each other's children and all that sort of stuff. We can't achieve that through geographical proximity, but what we can do is create these connections that Gary alluded to, like the West Midlands Regional Defence and Security Cluster, which launched about 2 weeks ago. That's the West Midlands saying collectively, we aren't dense enough to win business, but if we come together, then we can be. In order to support that growth of the businesses, though, it's not just those connections. It is also money. It is also access to universities. There is an Ignite partnership across 16 of the universities of the West Midlands, bringing together those universities who've got interest in research and spinning out ideas. We're part of that as well. And then to fund that, Malvern Hill Science Park is launching something called, in partnership with the County Council, Catalyse Angel Network. The County Council will be a contributor to the funds of that, so will the Science Park. That will support the funding of new businesses at the Science Park to help them grow and develop. That gives you that sort of combination of connection, intellectual, academic connection. It gives you the connections across the businesses that are in your sector through the security cluster, defence and security cluster, and it gives you the funding to get going, which is one of the key ingredients to get those businesses up and running.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Yes, quite an interesting question from Councillor Birch, really. What can we do to promote it? Well, you've got one of the biggest social media followings out there, so talk about it. I mean, honestly, we've got 57 councillors with a huge reach. And really what you've got to do is raise awareness of the assets and the capabilities and the things that we have got. We've got some great things. And Malvern Hill Science Park, I don't know, have you actually been, Councillor Birch? Well, there we go. Perhaps what we can do is organise a councillor trip to the Science Park. So if we can take that as an action away, because I certainly did it at, we did it at Shrub Hill, didn't we? We sent a group over there to go and have a look. But I think it's really important that everybody is aware of what is there. Now, one of the things that was raised initially that we've utilised with some of the assets of Worcestershire County Council is you couldn't get there. So one of the first things I tried to do is get it added to the Worcestershire on-demand route. So you could link the train station and actually get to the Science Park. So there's simple things like that you can do. But without doubt, it's shouting from the rooftops and saying, look, we've got this asset. This is the sectors that are involved in. It's really exciting and it's really high-paid jobs. Now, the unfortunate part is the work from home scenario that you have got has changed the footfall. It then makes the cafe difficult to be viable and things like that. But these facilities do need to be sweated far more, and that's one of the things I'm going to actually be focusing on. But what I would ask is that the councillors get over there. Let's organise something and a networking event. And the chief exec was talking about what we can do, and I think networking at that site, it's a stunning building. I mean, it really is. The offices there are fabulous. The boardroom's fabulous. The cafe's fabulous. We are not using it enough. And I think what we'll do, we'll start talking about using it as an asset for Worcestershire County Council as well in terms of what it's got. Because the more people we can get through the door, the better. but I'm definitely absolutely focused on it. I think we need a bit of an American buzz to it. Now, I don't know whether anybody's aware of the Rigby Group in Birmingham. I've arranged a meeting with Steve Rigby tomorrow, who's running the West Midlands growth programme, really, in terms of bringing West Midlands businesses together, and their mantra is to unlock regional growth across Britain. We must devolve power and opportunities to local regions. So I'm going to have a meeting with him tomorrow. It's only a short meeting, he's a busy man, but it's opening up what can we do from Worcestershire, working with our near neighbours and partners to promote what we've got and get involved in unlocking that growth, because we've got far better transport links now. We can utilise this. This is a really important sector moving forward. Defence is going to have a bit of a odd area with some people and some councillors, but you can only have to look at the state of the world now to see that this is unfortunately going to be a huge growth sector. So we've got to take advantage of it, but it is, promote it, talk about it, and I'll arrange for a trip down there. Let's see how many of you we can actually get through the door.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Kent. And we will certainly take that as an action and take you up on that offer, not least because you promoted the cafe very heavily. So I'm always keen to frequent a cafe. Any other questions from any other panel members? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning all. So mine's a bit twofold question, really. Looking through the development phases, you mentioned phase 6 remains an opportunity for further development. And further on point 27, phase 6 of the site remains an ongoing concern, and then it lists various reasons why. Maybe I've missed something here, but is there a forecast of how much phase 6 is going to cost? And just as important, or more important really for taxpayers, the potential return on any investment? Thank you.
Having come out of a meeting where I was discussing this very topic yesterday, it's fresh in my mind really. And I'm not going to talk about numbers, I'm going to talk about viability. Yeah, so we're all aware of the County Council's finances. So if we're going to go and invest in a speculative building project at this particular point in time, I think I've probably got bigger problems on my jobs list really. But it's in terms of that doesn't mean we don't want to make sure that space is utilised. So we're going to look at all the opportunities that are available to get that developed. Now, whether that's through us or through others, and it's got to go through the board. It's not our decision. It's a proper decision that's got to be made by the board in terms of what it does. But we want to utilise that space, and obviously we want to get a return from that space as well. So we're going to be looking at all ways that we can actually do it. But at the moment, I don't think it's viable for us to develop it and provide the units and then lease them out. That currently isn't on the table. With the interest rates that they are and the state of the economy and the demand, it just wouldn't be there, and it'd be a very foolish move at this stage. But that isn't to say that there's an opportunity for somebody that might want to develop it themselves, but we've got to look at all eventualities, and it's got to go through the board anyway.
Alan, did you want to comment on that? Do you want to just swing your... Sorry.
The Deputy Leader has sort of summed up the position, I think, quite correctly as far as the County Council's investment is concerned. There is more than one way to achieve funding for Phase 6, and it depends on the nature of a potential tenant and the nature of the interest. So if you had a large single occupier who might be interested in building out themselves, maybe that would work. There may be a way of restructuring the finances at the science park, which would allow for the science park to borrow money in order to fund that investment. So there are a number of potential routes to securing the growth of the science park, and in particular starting with Phase 6. We shouldn't necessarily assume that the County Council will be the source of the funding to fill that viability gap. The Deputy Leader referred to the investment in defence, the defence sector. There's a further £15 billion coming down the tracks if the defence investment plan is eventually published by government. Speculatively, people are talking about 15 billion. There are other agencies within government who could potentially fund. So the Education Funding Agency might be interested in funding further developments of the school, which could be a way of weaving together the work of the science park with the work of the school. You can, in fact, I am launching a future entrepreneurs program with the school, so that students who don't want to go to university but do want to set up their own businesses will have the opportunity to do that in partnership with the science park and another county council initiative, Beta Den. So what we're trying to do is broaden our reach, broaden the way that we can achieve our objectives, not being narrowly focused on just saying, well, can one organisation or another support the gap to develop phase 6, but just making sure that we're looking at all those opportunities so we can continue to deliver for the people of South Worcestershire.
Thank you. Does that cover everything? Councillor Taylor.
Just on that point, really, and a quite almost impossible answer, well, it is an impossible answer at this stage, but we have, in a year's time, we're going to have shadow elections, and we're yet to know if it's going to be north and south. It could be one Worcestershire, which I'm very strongly on the side of. If a difficult question to Mr. Kent, but if will this be impacted? Will this sort of investment be impacted? If it is a north and a south, or if it's one Worcestershire, will there be a difference of investment or support from a council? Being that if it is south, then all the investment, I would imagine, will come from the south to the south. If it's one Worcestershire, will that change that impact as far as you're concerned?
Councillor Kent, if you're happy to answer that.
I am happy,
on
actually.
the border of you being asked to be Mystic Meg, but yes, if you're happy to answer that.
I was in with the chief executive, and it was a similar conversation yesterday, but not along those lines, really. But look, we'll get a decision, I think, second week in July. That's what we're looking at. And at that point, then we can assess what we're going to do and where we're going to go. And it's not going to be without its challenges. What I would say in terms of this is you've got to look at the economic position of the country at the moment in terms of any investment. And bear in mind, Shrub Hill falls under my portfolio, Worcester 6, Worcester Parkway expansion, and all of these. And unfortunately, this government has created a situation where there is a total lack of appetite for investment in anything. I mean, we're going to go to skills in a bit, and we are in a very, very difficult position. And when interest rates were 1%, the council had loads of money. Yeah, the businesses had plenty of money. We could all invest and we could do whatever. But we have a very, very difficult position, fiscal position at the moment, whereby the council is struggling, and also a lot of the businesses are. So I think you've got to be very mindful of that. You can't venture down a pathway unless the outcome is clear, and we cannot take that risk. And I think the chief executives come up with, as I said, many different ways that we could probably get this away, and we've got to look into all of those to try and achieve that growth. And if there is some magic money coming out of this government, then we'll grasp it with both hands. But it hasn't been there for adults and children's. So what I will say is we're going to do our very best. But as to the decision with one or two, until I get that actual decision, you can't really say. It is Mystic Meg, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Kent, and I like your new name. Alan, did you want to pick up on that as well?
To just draw the committee's attention to paragraph 7 around the governance. Whatever the government decides around local authority restructuring, and that's not my business at all, but we do have 3 shareholders in the Malvern Hill Science Park business. It's the Chamber of Commerce, the District Council and the County Council. And the joint venture has those 2 councils as owners of the business. After the local government reorganisation, there'll only be 1 council. Both Worcestershire County Council and Malvern Hills District Council, to all intents and purposes, will cease to exist. So how the joint venture agreement is rewritten and restructured post the local government reorganisation, we'll have to work closely with the Deputy Leader and Gary Woodman about how that will manifest itself, and also how those things will hand over. So there's going to be quite a lot of legal stuff that's not, to my mind, productive, but it is a necessary step that will have to be taken as part of that process.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. We talk about investment, and as you can see in the report, we've invested quite a significant amount of money as a county council. The question I've got is, so what has the financial return been for the county council over the last 5 years, whether that's through dividends, rental income, asset appreciation and any other mechanisms? I just want to understand the value for money that the residents of Worcestershire are seeing from the park. Thank you.
Alan, oh, you're fixed. Excellent.
It works. So I think we can consider that question in probably a minimum of 3 parts. So first of all is the business rates that are paid by the businesses on the science park. The business rates for the science park are high if you speak to any of our tenants, and that feeds into the returns that councils get through the business rates. The second is the gross value added. So you've got upwards of up to 400 people employed on the site. The gross value added to the local economy, I calculate to be somewhere around the £22 million mark, so people are able to pay their council tax, they spend in the local shops, and these are the things that I think councils might be interested in. And then the final one is the direct return on the investment that you have, and that is through dividend. You get 3% return on the P1 shares, the initial preference shares, and you get 6.37% on the P2 shares. Now, the board has asked the owners, yourselves, what you want from the business. Do you want an economic return or do you want a financial return? And the owners have said we are more interested in the economic return. We're interested in you reinvesting in the business, so you can use those dividends to reinvest in the business rather than paying them to us directly. But if you can pay them, then we will have them as requested. So in 2024, I've paid somewhere in the region of £630,000 in dividend to the district council and the county council. You've not requested dividends since, so we're able to invest in projects like solar panels on the top of the phase 1 roof. We're looking at restructuring our Wi-Fi offer so that it's best in class for our tenants. So you can see that the decision whether or not to take dividends yields the ability to make investments on the part of the science park. So I think that's probably how I would split it up into those 3 areas: business rates, the gross value added into the local economy, and also the dividend as and when it is paid, but on request.
Thank you, Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Interesting question, Nick, really. The park was built before I was actually in post, but I do know that it was a combination of grant income and investment. So, and I think what the chief executive is talking about is, I suppose it's like, this is what councils used to do before they became NHS2. Yeah, and the ability to be able to invest in things that's going to create better jobs for people, an ongoing investment return, and that business rate income, which I'd prefer came to the council rather than going to the government, is really, really beneficial. So I think, and the other point about the reinvestment with the dividend is something we always look at, I think, really. But one of the things I would draw your attention to is currently it's 90% occupancy, I think, isn't it? Yeah, now you've got to keep reinvesting into that site to ensure that you keep that occupancy up. So if you start to bleed it dry, you're going to end up not investing in those things that make people want to move there. So I think it's a delicate balance that you've got to do to balance the situation with the finances of the county council and the district council, but also we've got to make sure that it's still fit for purpose. But if you've got any more detailed stuff that isn't covered in the report, if you drop me an email or pop in and see me, you know where the office is. You do have difficulty in finding it, but you're more than welcome to pop in, and I'll make sure Gary's there to run through any bits you like.
Thank you. That covers everything for you, Councillor Price.
Definitely. Have you got the sofa in there yet, Councillor Kent?
We have actually. We managed to find one that wasn't being used in County Hall because we were into repurposing assets of zero value.
Councillor Allen.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Good morning, Council. I've got a few questions, if that's okay. Earlier, when you gave your presentation, you talked about infrastructure and looking ahead. And I wonder what problems or what would help with infrastructure going forward that the County Council could possibly look at.
Well, junction 7A on the M5 would be really helpful.
Where would you want that where would you want that to be?
Well, ultimately, the better connected the Malvern area is, the easier it is for business to do what it does. And so heading south via Upton can be a bit traumatic, and to get onto the M5. Heading north to junction 7 is much better than it was, but you know, wouldn't it be great to be able to have that direct link off the M5 into Malvern? But I appreciate that that's just a pipe dream. I think making sure that, as the deputy leader said, flying the flag for the area, and particularly the asset that is Malvern Hill Science Park, would be absolutely tremendous. Making sure that the railway links into Malvern remain a priority for the railway companies, so that people can get to and from easily. It's quite a long journey from Malvern up to Birmingham on the railways, because it's a relatively slow train, but let's make sure that you can still continue to lobby for that investment. So those are the sort of things that I would hope you'd be able to continue to put in for. I know that there's housing plans for the area, so that we've got the right quality stock of housing, and the Chief Executive of the District Council talked about, for the South Worcestershire Development Plan, I think it's somewhere in the region of 20,000 homes in the South Worcestershire Development Plan. That gives places for people to live, and they're going to need places to work. There's something like 300 hectares of employment land also available within that. We want to make sure that the science park remains a priority for the investment. And that land doesn't get repurposed for housing in the event that it's slow to get away. That plays to my point earlier about patient money and patient investment. If the county council remains, or your successor council remains patient, we can deliver, but you have to allow us the time to do that, time and space to do that. So not a brilliant answer, a bit of a pipe dream, but hopefully something that you can lobby for in due course.
Thank you, Councillor Kent.
There's a fight here between me and my number. He wants to get in first. Yeah, if he says anything, he'll get up with the job. It's interesting. I think Junction 7A. I mean, I was just thinking how long that would take, and the effort in carving a motorway through all that farmland with a coalition. I think particularly in Malvern. But the interesting aspect is Junction 7. Because obviously with the Parkway development and the success of Worcester 6 at Junction 6, I think, you know, that does feed quite nicely in on the new road all the way down to Malvern. And I think that housing there, I think getting into Malvern is going to be probably 25, 30 minutes perhaps at worst. So I think it does give an opportunity for jobs for those people at Worcester Parkway when those houses are built there. So I think as part of what we're doing, and potential business expansion on Worcester 7, would it be called? Or would it be something else? Worcester 6?
Worcester 7, I think.
It would seem sensible to go to 7. So I think there's huge potential there, and that is an interesting one. But those houses at Parkway will need jobs, and this is a place that can provide them.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you've got more questions?
Yes, thank you. Yes, interesting. I am the county councillor for Upton, and that's around here. So I'm not sure my residents would be too happy about another huge road. They'd probably be happier about a new bridge in the Hanley Road being arisen, so it stops flooding, and that would certainly solve a lot of problems, I think. But at the moment, it's only currently closed 11 days a year. I think once we go up to 40 or 50 days a year, as climate change takes its effect, we would have to revisit it, because obviously there is a danger that you can't get onto the M50 easily or onto the M5. But anyway, that's for the future. And as for the railways, yes, definitely. I mean, I have a large number of complaints about the train service, and it has been in the press, between Malvern and Worcester, and therefore Malvern and Birmingham, and I assume Bristol as well. So that's definitely something we need. along with a small railway station at Rushwick, which was in the South Worcestershire Development Plan R for a bit, and then when we all voted it through, so far it disappeared, but that's for another day. So moving on to, are there any recruitment issues and retention of staff, do you know, in there?
So again, the Growth Hub works with the tenants. We did the tenant survey. Obviously, generally, what we get back from the Chamber of Commerce QES, which asks this question every quarter, is 50% say it's difficult to recruit, and 50% say that they find recruitment easy, or easier, shall I say? Probably one. I would then say for the science park itself, I mean, I think the discussion's been about access and getting staff in and all those kind of things about road, rail and all that connection. Obviously at the next scrutiny panel will come broadband and mobile, which again we've made significant inroads and improved. So I would say all that is about attracting talent, attracting staff. It is often people will find the jobs in the location. So actually, Alan might reference a company that's recently moved in, Suffolco, and they've moved their staff, and what they've seen is all those staff have come and followed the company to that location. So we are always working on improving the kind of recruitment of science, technology, engineering and maths careers into the county. So yes, there are the normal kind of wider economy challenges, but I don't think this site presents any more challenges than that from what we saw.
And last one, Chair. Sorry, thank you.
No apology required. Carry on.
Thank you for that. And then I think obviously we've got the issue of AI coming along very, very rapidly. Even my reports don't have too many spelling errors in them anymore, thanks to Copilot. But obviously, more people want to work from home or perhaps live in a different country and work for companies. So has this been considered? Because will we need that much office space going forward? Is it time to look at this and say, things are going to change. We have to change and be at the front of the queue and not at the back of the queue?
Sorry, I think Alan's going to... No need to fight. You can.
Yes, we have had a change as a consequence of both COVID and AI. So I think if you were going to think of COVID as a good preparation for the future of office requirements, and then that segues into AI, I think that'd be a useful way to think about it. We encourage tenants to occupy the smallest space they need in order to fulfill their daily requirements. So if you've got a business of 10 people, previously you'd need an office that could accommodate 10 people. Post-COVID, for 10 people, you'd need an office that could accommodate 4, and the flexibility to use meeting rooms on the science park to have whole team meetings maybe once a month, and we have that facility. AI, I think, is going to have a similar sort of effect where you say, well, okay, I've got 10 people in my office, I only need 2 or 3 in at a particular time. And the benefit the science park has, and the reason why we were able to respond to that, is we have flexible leases, which means that if people need to downsize or upsize, they can do so relatively straightforwardly, and that we've got those meeting room spaces and also the ability to service that with lunches and teas and coffees, so they can have those plenary meetings with their teams as they want them. I do think in counter to that, though, young people in particular are wanting to spend time in the office to learn about how to do business. And that being stuck at home behind your computer screen, aged 23, 24 years of age, you're not learning and understanding on the job with older colleagues about how to actually get jobs done. It also limits, and I'm not sure that there's a route round this, that sort of innovation thing that you get going on. So you can imagine it as councillors, you sometimes sat together, you've had a meeting, you go, oh, I tell you what, so this could be a good idea. Have you thought about this? And you have that back and forth where you sort of craft an idea just with a back and forth face-to-face conversation. And I think that there is a requirement and a need and indeed a demand on the part of younger people to spend time in a physical setting with colleagues. So we don't know how it's going to play out longer term, but I think that actually there will be a residual demand. It won't be the 10 person office for 10 employees. It will be smaller than that, but we can accommodate it.
Thank you. I think Gary also wants to come back.
I'll just add, because I was going to echo some of those points that Anna just made, but the other point is we work with GS Dillons, who's a commercial agent in the county, who works with all the commercial agents to then bring together that intelligence. And what we know is exactly what Anna said. Employers want flexibility, but they want high quality. So when employees are coming into office space or their work environment, it needs to be high quality, and kind of a place where networking, conversation, meetings, ideas, and those kind of things can happen. Science Park's well set up for that, but we know through that report that also we're seeing that across the county, and it has informed the way that we're structuring Item Alex House and Shrub Hill, that again has come to this committee, and certainly that quality of space is something that brings them in.
Thank you, Councillor Kent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good question, I suppose. How relevant to Malvern Hills Science Park? Well, you think, what does AI need? Broadband. It needs really good internet and everything else. And so investing in the facilities that you've got on the site to ensure that you've got those capabilities is going to be critical. Does AI cost jobs? Well, it's supposed to improve productivity. So does it just not allow a few people to make more or produce more? So I suppose you could question it in terms of the opposite side of the argument, that maybe it would allow companies to actually grow far quicker because it allows them to do things that otherwise they may not have been able to afford or didn't have the capabilities to do. It's going to have a huge change, I think, in terms of my view of what I've seen in my years on this planet. This is the biggest tech revolution I've ever seen. And I think we've got to accept that this is happening, and we've got to look at what we're doing. I think Malvern Hills Science Park, I think when I was there a couple of years ago, we were talking about, even then, about the flexibility with the size of the units post-COVID in terms of being able to shrink them down. So I think it's a huge opportunity. You think about the data centres that are required to process this data, the energy that it utilises and everything else. There's a lot of other industries that you've got to think about that are going to need to tip into this. The sheer amount of power it uses is off the scale. And to do that, you've got to have the right power networks. You've got to be able to generate that power. So a huge opportunity in a lot of different areas. I wouldn't regard it particularly as a warning thing, but I do echo the Chief Exec's view in terms of working in an office and everything else as well. For young people moving forward, they need mentors, they need people next to them, they need people that can show them what to do. And I think working from home is great for specific things, but I think for mental health and career development and everything else, it's not brilliant. And that's my personal view, but we'll be doing everything we can to make sure that we can utilise this new technology across all of the assets that we have, not just Malvern Hills Science Park.
Thank you. Does that cover everything for you, Councillor Allen? Thank you. Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. Question more on the operational side of things. When it comes to enticing startups in particular, now I know in particular around cyber and defence, procurement and contracting, that quite often they rely on seed capital to get them started, and then they rely on landing that government contract to essentially bring in the money that allows them to pursue or deliver a project. Now, when it comes to setting up a unit, in particular in the science park, how is it that it can be made enticing and, more importantly, affordable for these startups that are relying on simply just having that seed capital to begin with to come onto the science park before they necessarily have that pot of money to be able to work or deliver a project?
The enticing them in is about having a flexibility of... Sorry, Madam Chairman, I just went straight for it. I didn't...
You carry on, Alan.
Is about having a range of accommodation options that they can utilise as part of their tenancy at the science park. So you can come along and use a hot desk facility if you're just getting going and you think to yourself, I don't want to be working out of my sitting room. I want to be working in an environment where like-minded people are, and that is very, very cheap. So it's £12.50 per day. You come in, you occupy the desk, free teas and coffees. You'd be part of the science park. You can use the cafe. And then once you've done that, if your business is growing, you can move into an enterprise unit. That's a small unit of 200 square feet, something like that, 20 square meters. And you then have an all-in price, so you know exactly what your outgoings are per month. And then as you grow, you then have to expose yourself to the realities of the market conditions. So you'll move into a bigger unit, rent, service charge, rates, all those considerations. Sitting alongside that is financial support, which allows you to try to attract angel investment into your business. You're able to do that through something called the Catalyse Angel Network, which we're just launching now. That will, you'll be able to do pitch events, so you'll go along to potential investors. And the UK has got a fantastic scheme which allows for investors to protect themselves from tax payments. Hopefully, the government doesn't have a go at that and it stays in place because it's really attractive for investors into new start businesses. You go and do your pitch to one of the investors, you get your first round of funding. And then, of course, you need mentorship. You've got the Growth Hub, and BetaDen allows for the mentorship to encourage you to run your business in a way that makes money. I've often had, over my 25 years in the science park industry, had businesses who've forgotten that the key thing that you've got to do in a business is sell stuff. Because if you don't sell stuff, you ain't going to make any money. You can fiddle around with your idea and your concept. We've had people who've had rounds and rounds of venture capital funding because they've got a brilliant idea and they've got the patent that protects it. But a patent is just a store of value. You've got to do something with it, and then you've got to sell it onto the open market in due course. So we've got that available. There's some stuff which is slightly immature. So the Catalyse Angel Network thing is just getting going. The Science Parks agreed to support that along with the County Council and Herefordshire Council. But these sort of things are the things that we are doing to support those businesses to get going and grow, because your question's really relevant. There's no point just having a property initiative somewhere where you can locate your business. You need that support to grow and develop.
Thank you, Gary.
I suppose what we've done as the County Council is, BetaDen situated at the Science Park, an accelerator programme to provide that business support, but also there is a startup programme, and there is now a business BetaDen incubate process that captures these businesses at all those stages, and you can see how they then feed into potentially the Science Park as one location of where they can land. But obviously there are other locations across the county as well, the Kiln, we're seeing Base Point in Bromsgrove. So these businesses can establish themselves in whichever location they're at and get the support that they need is important as well. So we've driven this as part of how do you get those businesses to land, establish, grow roots and grow.
Thank you, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but £12.50 a day, did you say, Alan? Yeah. Well, don't we need to promote that? Yeah. You imagine sat in that bedroom, perched on the edge of the bed, trying to work on the table, working from home, and for £12.50 a day you could go down to Malvern Hills Science Park, utilise the cafe, make that more viable, and actually be able to share experiences and networking with other like-minded people. So I think we'll definitely have a go at trying to get that heavily promoted, really, preferably through the councillors, and particularly those based in Malvern. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Councillor Birch, does that cover everything for you? Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So I only have one thing in common with Keir Starmer, fortunately for me, which his father was a toolmaker. Yeah. So thank the Lord for that. But back in my day in engineering, I sort of followed in my dad's footsteps and spent 30 years in industry, and I worked a lot with catapult centres. So biggest was probably the NCC. In Bristol, I worked with WMG, and both of those, I mean, there are others, but they're kind of funded and supported by large engineering companies. So the NCC was kind of widely Rolls-Royce and Airbus and so on, and the WMG JLR, where that journey began. So a question I have two questions really. The first one is how much work, and I may have missed this, so apologies if I have, but how much work have you or the businesses, should I say, that you can draw onto the site, how can they tap into some of that knowledge if you're talking to things like Worcestershire, Worcester University and local colleges, and how can you promote those businesses to work with younger people? And we're going to move on to that in the second part of the agenda, but it's really important, I think. And the second part of this side of things is we talk about defence and we talk about AI and technology. I think what's important to remember is we still need to make things, and I think that gets lost. I'm an engineer by trade, and I see growth not just in computers and program writer, but we still need to make things. I think we need to encourage that as well. I know it's a technology part, but we do need to consider that, although Councillor Kent mentions that AI is there to support humans, we'll say, for the future. We also need to remember we still need to make things. So it's also important to, when we're talking to new businesses, to also put across that they need to consider that not everything in the future is going to be AI and computers. We still need to make things, particularly when we're talking about defence, and that's something that's important. So your strategy on both of those really, one working with universities and how to encourage businesses on the part to work with local people and encourage those to get into this area, and secondly, the idea of manufacturing and not to get lost, because I think it is lost in certain parts of the country. Thank you.
Councillor Kent?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is the chair of the board is Chris Walker, I think is Managing Director of Defence and Cyber, is it at Kinetic? Yeah, so straight away that biggest employer is involved within Malvern Hills Science Park. I think Alan is doing an awful lot in the other fields, and I think it's probably more pertinent for Alan to be able to pick up those particular elements, but that connection with businesses and landmark employers is clearly there already. There's always more you can do, don't get me wrong, but we are in that area whereby one of those the key employers is already chair of the actual board.
Alan?
I didn't think I'd hear anybody talk about catapult centres at this meeting, but we had tried to get a mini catapult at Malvern, and that was in partnership with Kinetic, but unfortunately we were unsuccessful. You're quite right about the connection with universities. The businesses on the science park don't have the time to look up and look out for the opportunities with the universities. And part of the university funding streams require them to be integrating themselves with small and medium-sized enterprises in order to tick boxes for their funding. And my job is to make sure I'm aware of what is going on across the West Midlands universities and arguably in the north of the southwest region as well, so that the businesses who are looking for new technology to integrate into their technology have a route to do that, and I can flag it for them. So it is a requirement in my role to know what our businesses are doing, what the universities are interested in securing SME participation in their research schemes, and to connect the dots. And when it does happen, it's absolutely magical. You see that growth, you see that integration of new technology. You're quite right about making things. At the science park, we don't call it making things, or our businesses don't call it making things. They call it system integration. That's just a snazzy way of saying putting stuff together. So that there are quite a few integrators on the science park. They're doing just small pieces of work on small projects, putting stuff together, and then it's going out the door. We do have a limitation on what we can do in the science park from a planning covenant perspective. That can be changed. We can't have manufacturing on the site, and those that do move from sort of piecework into sort of broader batch manufacturing will have to go elsewhere. We've got a couple of examples of that have left the science park in my time. One is a sensing company. They just grew. They needed to make and sell product, and they moved from the science park to a business park in Malvern called the Spring Lane Business Park, so that we didn't lose them to the region. They remain a technology business in the Malvern area, and they've grown and done tremendously well. So we do still do that integration of making things part as well.
Gary?
It's also a role of the Growth Hub to kind of go out and advise those manufacturers. So there are a number of business support programs that are there available for our manufacturing base. Something called knowledge transfer partnerships, where university grads come in either partway through their course or at the end of their course to kind of embed themselves within the business. There's numerous examples across Worcestershire where KTPs, knowledge transfer partnerships, are used. Certainly Morgan, Metis in Redditch, you know, I can probably list you a whole number that use that. Equally, there's a program called Made Smarter, and again, that then brings that technology to the manufacturers about how they're utilising greater efficiency to be more productive. So, particularly as I always talk nationally about Worcestershire, we still make stuff, which in some quarters of the country that becomes a surprise, but you know, I think it's something we need to hold on to, and I'm sure under the next item, Judy can talk about our apprentices and apprenticeships in engineering and manufacturing.
Thank you. Does that cover everything for you, Councillor Taylor? Yeah,
So in my time in industry, I kind of finished my career as a sales and marketing director, and I worked with lots of these smaller sites and catapult centres. I also worked with a new park at Silverstone, where there were smaller units set up for kind of entry level and small businesses. And in my position as a sales and marketing director, we were manufacturing and selling metrology systems, so measurement, high specification measurement systems. And what we did is we on these sites, we would put in our own equipment, so the smaller businesses could use them like a subcontract basis. And this was the latest in technology, where these small businesses couldn't afford, you know, to spend £1 million on an industrial X-ray machine. Is this sort of thing happening at, forgive me if it might already be, but is this sort of thing happening where you're speaking to other businesses where they can put their products in? So firstly, it's a lot like a demonstration centre, but also the smaller businesses can use the products. And the idea being, of course, that when they grow large enough, they leave their premises and go and get larger premises, and then they, in turn, purchase the equipment they've been using for, I mean, I'm not just talking metrology, of course, I'm talking anything. Is that happening now?
That's really happening at what are these catapult centres. So again, we will bring a kind of those smaller companies together in Worcestershire, arrange for them to go and visit, to go and see, so that, yeah, they can see and access those kind of things. They're not here in Worcestershire, but they are kind of in neighbouring areas of Coventry and Warwickshire. So they're either at University of Warwick or, I've forgotten the other one off the top of my head. Yeah, one of Warwick, and then there's the other one. Brain's gone. But so there's two in the West Mids that basically we take our manufacturers to, so that actually they're seeing this. We have seen some makerspace stuff that was in the City of University and that kind of the Birmingham conurbation. That investment in that kit, you know, whatever you buy today is basically out of date. So we know that other companies, we've got quite a few tooling companies. So we've got Mazak, and we've got a company in Wire Forest that escapes me again. Which one? Armada. They have both demonstrator centres as well. So we kind of use both of them as well to, you know, they're keen to obviously show the customers their tooling systems, but the more we can expose businesses and local businesses into that environment, then they're either getting a choice to buy it or they're getting a chance to use it at the catapult. So as much as we can, we're trying to show, demonstrate and lead companies to think about this stuff. Some of them are chomping at the bit to use it and how they do it. Some we're having to kind of lead them to water, as the phrase goes.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, I've got the T-shirt for that particular initiative of buying kit for companies to use and then them not using it. I remember in 2003-04 at Aston Science Park, we spent money on a consultancy to buy 10 pieces of photonics and metrology equipment. Half a dozen of them got used. One fibre alignment machine, very, very expensive. It costs a lot of money to set up and keep calibrated, and never got used in anger. So it's a risky business to get into, and it's not necessarily going to pay back. It's a bit niche, I think I've been to the facility at Warwick Manufacturing Group, where you can set up your manufacturing line and experiment with the way the line operates, and you can get it to the most efficient one prior to purchasing the equipment. They're the big players in this area. Let them get on with it. Let Gary take those groups up to the Warwick Manufacturing Group to have a play around, and then we can facilitate their requirements once they've decided how they want to do it.
Thank you. And the final word, Councillor Kent.
Yeah, I'd like to take a different line, to be honest, because I get the direction you're going in, but I think you raised something that I think is more pertinent about what is made in Worcestershire and what people do, and celebrating that and promoting it. So I think we'll take that away, actually, because I think, you know, the sort of made in Worcestershire type thing, isn't it, really, getting a big profile on that. And the interesting one, talking about the Warwick Manufacturing Group, is I actually went there with my daughter, coming on to probably something that Judy will touch on, really, because they were taking children at the age of 14 to teach them how to do engineering. Yep, and both software and hardware and everything else as well, working on the machines. So instead of going down that sort of leaving school and going into that thing, they were giving them the education and the practical training that would enable them to be up and running from a job scenario far younger than they would be going through the standard educational sector. And we'll probably start on some of those elements there. But I'm going to definitely take away what we can do to promote what Worcestershire does. Malvern Hills Science Park, they probably don't want to say what they do to a certain extent in terms of it. I couldn't see that there would be an exhibition of the technology that they produce there because of the very nature of what they produce. But I think across Worcestershire, it is something we need to pick up on, and we need to try and find a way that we can promote it and make that awareness and help them to grow across the UK and worldwide.
Thank you, and thank you everybody. I think really from that, as far as a takeaway is concerned, there's an awful lot that we'll be able to transition across to the next agenda item. There's a lot of things that we can encompass within there. Certainly, we've very much heard that we need to make sure that Malvern Science Park remains connected, and so to ensure that the rail link into Malvern remains a priority. But also the thing that's very much come out of it for the Cabinet member to take away of the celebrate what's made in Worcestershire, but the key thing is to really promote what is at the science park, because I'm sure we've all been fully enlightened today about all sectors of business and how from the £12.50 a day for the desk-in with the tea and coffee. You don't even need to go to the cafe. So I think that's really important. If you can take that away, Councillor Kent, please, to promote that so that all councillors know and we can all fly the flag for the Science Park and make people in Worcestershire really aware of what's available. Councillor Allen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I agree that a site visit would be worthwhile, so maybe we can programme that in. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. So if everybody's okay, and thank you very much, Alan, for coming, and Scott. So we'll move on to the next item, which is youth employment and apprenticeships in Worcestershire. And with us, we have Councillor Boatwright Green, who is the Cabinet member with responsibility for education, SEND and skills. And we also have Judy Gibbs, Head of Service Skills and Employability, Adults and Communities Directorate. So can I hand over to you, Judy, please?
Good morning, everybody. I've actually brought with me, I have a dotted line into Gary, so I may refer to him at some point, but I've also brought with me Charlotte McCourtry, who is the Youth Programme Employment Manager, just for any of those tricky questions you throw our way. So this is a really complicated subject, I think it's fair to say, and for the purposes of the paper, I split it into two parts. So I'm going to suggest that we do the same, and perhaps pause after we've discussed, after I've talked to you about youth unemployment for questions, and then move on to the apprenticeship agenda, if that's okay. What I would say is, Worcestershire continues to operate in a really challenging labour market context, and there's particular pressures that we're seeing that are being played out in young people. Overall, claimant numbers in terms of universal credit have declined over the past 12 months across the board. However, young people are being disproportionately affected, and that number continues to go up. I'm sad to tell you that as of the point of writing this report, that number has increased since then. So we're now at a point of 2,355 young people, and 5.7% who are claiming universal credit. And there's lots of caveats in data, and one of the caveats is that doesn't mean they're not working, it just means they may not be working enough. And what we would roughly say when we look at that data is it tends to be about a third will be working. And it can go up to 50%, but I'd go with about a third for the purposes of now. And that does vary across the county, and there are reasons for that. So Worcester is at 4.6%, which equates to 510 young people. Obviously, Worcester has a population of students, which will play into that number, which is why, to some extent, although there are other reasons, that number will remain lower than we'd see across the rest of the county. And I suppose most noticeably, the highest district is Redditch, and it continues to grow at alarming rates. And then Forest is also experiencing a little bit of an upward trend, slightly out of kilter with the rest of the county. What we should say as well is that this isn't the end of the picture. So when it comes to the data, there are a couple of things that the government kind of look at. And I'm sure you will have all been aware since writing this paper, the Alan Milburn review has come out, and I will talk to you about that, although it is not in this paper. So neat numbers, and when we talk about neat numbers in Worcestershire context, what we're talking about is 16, 17, 18-year-olds that should be in in education or employment. We're not necessarily talking about the government's measure, which they talk about, which is 16 to 24-year-olds, which encompasses 3 groups of people. So it will encompass those on universal credit, and that will be more widely than just those who are not working and seeking work. It will also include those who are on health benefits. They will also talk about NEAT data, and that's the data they receive from local authorities, which has some flaws in it, but I can tell you about Worcestershire's data. And it will also talk about inactives. And inactives are people that are not actively in the labour market. What they will have done, I'm fairly sure, is taken out students, because that would absolutely raise that number more significantly. But if there are young people who are not working for health reasons, caring reasons, then they will be in that data. So in terms of our NEAT figures, we currently have, and actually again this number has been reviewed, it's about 622 young people. What we should say is that whenever we look at NEAT young people, we also have an element of what we call unknowns, and it's simple as we don't know what's going on with them. We spend a process from September onwards as a local authority going through all of that data and whittling that down to figure out what we know about them. Our unknown numbers are really low in Worcestershire. We do that really well, but also in Worcestershire we're really honest about our data. The government suggests that there are different ways, and it's a bit open to interpretation as to whether you consider someone to be in education or employment, and we will only put someone as being in education employment when they have a full-time job or a full-time course. We won't look at those who are just doing something for a few weeks. So that's why we know our data is absolutely where we're very honest about that. What you'll see is in other areas, you'll see where they have what looks like really low NEAT figures, but then their youth unemployment will be sky high. And that's the reason why, because they're not necessarily having that sort of take on how they record their figures. So just to quickly pick up on apprenticeships, our apprenticeships remain pretty comparatively strong. The government talks about the fall in apprenticeships, and I don't think this is something we've seen as much in Worcestershire. So we have around 2,000 young people every year that kind of age 16 to 25 that are completing apprenticeships. And there may be some reasons for that in our strategy and what we've been doing for the last 10 years. And I will talk about that later in the sort of second phase of this. So very much a mixed picture for young people in Worcestershire. We have 3 strategies that play into this. So we have the Get Worcestershire Working strategy that I presented to Cabinet last autumn in September. We have a health and work strategy that we work with the NHS Integrated Care Board on, and we have our existing NEAT strategy as well as a council. And all of those things kind of play together to support this picture. So I've talked to you a little bit about the data, but I won't go over that for the purposes of this, because I'm sure you can read that yourselves. But there is a graph in there, and I did think it might be quite difficult to tell which line is the Worcestershire line. So just for purposes of that, it is the bottom one. So you can see, whilst we have an issue, absolutely we do, and it is a worrying trend. Actually, in the context of the West Midlands particularly, particularly, you will see we are significantly below the West Midlands scenario and slightly below the overall England position, but I don't think that makes our situation any less of a concern. In terms of our sort of focus, there are several areas in that, and there are some bits that we're not necessarily talking about today, but it might be something you want to hear about in future, about how we work with education to prevent those young people falling into being neat. So we are working on our sort of smoother transitions between education and employment. We are looking at how we strengthen our employer engagement in terms of those entry-level opportunities. Very much always working on how do we align skills provision to meet the needs of our local labour market. And how do we provide additional support in slightly different ways to those districts where we see that persistently high rates. And then aligning other council priorities. So actually, thinking about the impacts of those priorities. So I'm going to nervously raise transport as one of those. And actually, there is absolutely more that can be done in other areas of the council that will impact youth unemployment overall. So to talk about the programmes, we've recognised pretty much since COVID some worrying concerns around the number of young people that were becoming neat or that were unemployed. And for that reason, we started to put programmes in support of this in Worcestershire in 2020. So very much initially that started with the support we were able to provide, which was a bit of a helpline essentially. And then actually we started to move some of the programmes that we had that were more focused on apprenticeship support towards youth unemployment. In 2021, we started Careers Worcestershire. And Careers Worcestershire has evolved dramatically and has become a service to support all 16 to 24-year-olds, to give them information, advice and guidance, and to support them to move into the goal that they have. In terms of funding, we should say that this has never been something where the government give us a pot of money and say, use this to address youth unemployment. It's always been about us utilising different pots of money to pull them towards this agenda. So it's always been a bit of a jigsaw puzzle of funding, and it remains that to this day. So we, in 2021, worked with the Department for Work and Pensions and launched a youth hub in Worcester City, which is also one of the reasons that we know that the Worcester City figures are kept on an even keel and haven't increased as much as the other areas, because we've been doing that work for 4 years. So a youth hub essentially is holistic support. It actually accepts that young people don't necessarily need just some help with a CV. Actually, what's going on with young people is much broader than that. So it looks at their barriers and it brings in the support from other partners into one place to support them. So Charlotte's team will work with an individual. They'll look at actually what's their goal, how do they get there. They'll look at what the support that they need is along the way. Every young person is offered health and well-being. What we know, and we realised this fairly quickly, was that was one of the biggest challenges we had in that cohort. And that we actually know that every young person that goes through our health and wellbeing support, we find they have stronger outcomes than those that don't. Also looks at things like where we may have young people that have housing issues, drugs and alcohol issues, etc. And a youth hub, how it works is from a sort of logistical perspective, is it sits alongside the DWP work coaches. So DWP will select a group of young people that come into the youth hub. They will see them there for their benefit claimants, and then they'll be handed over to Charlotte's team. Charlotte's team, the way I describe it, is they kind of put their hand behind someone, they push them forward a little bit, off they go and complete that, and then they withdraw their hand. The next time they come in, they'll do the same again, and they push them forward a little bit. So since then, we've also started a youth hub in Redditch. So we're now just moving into our 3rd year of delivery in Redditch. Slightly different model, absolutely operates the same, but rather than being in a sort of central building in as it is in Worcester in the Hive, it's based in the heart of Worcestershire College in the Peakman campus. We have a separate entrance, and that allows some real benefits for us in terms of that alignment with the college. We've also been able to secure additional funding that's meant, which has come from various sources, including UK Shared Prosperity funding through the districts, where we've been able to put informal support in place. we call them informal hubs, and they are in Bromsgrove and Wye Forest. Until recently, we had a similar arrangement in Wychhaven, but unfortunately we've had to withdraw that. And also, if we're being honest, we didn't think it was working in the way we want it to work, and we're hoping to put new service in fairly soon that will, we think, have a greater impact. So just to give you some of the figures, in terms of the Youth Hub service, over the last financial year, we saw 504 young people engaged in our services, and that resulted in 298 employment outcomes, which is a really strong employment rate for these kind of services and for the kind of financial input that we're having. Beyond that, in our sort of wider Careers Worcestershire offer across the county, we saw 764 young people, and of those, 223 progressed into employment. What that says to me is that a youth hub model where you have that greater holistic support works more effectively in terms of supporting those young people. What we should say at this point is that funding is a significant challenge. With the loss of UK Shared Prosperity, there isn't a successor, and that means that we've had to sort of scrabble around to try to find bits of funding to continue this. We continue to be funded by the Department of Work and Pensions for our youth hub spaces, and we match fund that through various means, but through the County Council. So what we've also done is last year the County Council was given the opportunity to bid on a wider programme called Connect to Work. And Connect to Work is designed to support those who have health conditions and disabilities, but also other vulnerabilities. So they might have been coming out of the forces, they could be they could be a victim of domestic abuse, they could be a resettled Afghanistan, Afghan, etc. And what we've done with that Connect to Work funding is we've made a deliberate decision to offer a significant percentage of that towards 16 to 24-year-olds. So again, Charlotte's team, she now has a secondary team in the Hive who deliver that across the whole county. The difference between that and Careers Worcestershire is that offers an individual support for 12 months. And to describe that, what I would say is you wrap your arm around the young person and you don't let go. And actually, on their first day in employment, you're likely to be alongside them, helping them to understand how to do the job. We also work with the employers on that. So what that means is we're supporting those employers to understand how to successfully get the most out of that young person when it comes to working with whatever health condition that young person may have. Because I'm sure that you're aware that we have growing numbers of young people who have health conditions. We take a particular focus within that programme as well to support other areas of the council. So we actually have we have an advisor now who's embedded within the care leavers team to support those care leavers where we know NEET numbers are particularly bad. And that's their focus. And then the other one is around SEND. So again, we have an embedded advisor who supports that team in terms of those young people who finish their EHCPs, who would probably want to move into employment. How do we ensure that those young people move forward? So overall, what I would say is what we're doing is really good, but that's my but. And is it having the impact we really need it to have? But we are doing what we can with what we have. Wanted to talk to you quickly about the sort of national policy piece on this, and obviously since I wrote this paper this has evolved significantly, but when I wrote the paper at the time of writing it, we knew that the National Youth Guarantee Programme was coming in. This means that when a young person goes to a job centre, within the first 13 weeks, they will be offered the opportunity to educate themselves or move into various employment opportunities. If by 13 weeks they have not done that, they will be mandated to do that. So it's quite a significant shift in policy from the Department for Work and Pensions. And then the second phase of that is the introduction of the Jobs Guarantee, which I'm sure you will all have heard about, which is a subsidised placement to an employer for someone who's been out of work for 18 months. That isn't yet in Worcestershire. It was announced yesterday. Personally, I'm slightly disappointed by the announcement just because of the geographies they've chosen to put Worcestershire in. It's a huge geography that stretches from Cheshire all the way down to Herefordshire and across to Warwickshire, and surrounds various areas of the combined authority. The other thing is that they are looking to expand youth hubs, and we have already had a bit of a nod on the fact that they will be looking to build more youth hubs into Worcestershire, which we should see as a positive. The challenge with that is funding, because they are match funded, so we will have to find the match funded element our end to be able to do that. I think what we should say is the government's stance on all of these programmes at the moment that they're rolling out, and all of the initiatives that they're rolling out, are very much combined authorities first, everyone else second, and that is absolutely impacting Worcestershire and other geographies that are similar to us. So in terms of moving forward, I suppose we're maintaining our focus on Careers Worcestershire, on our Youth Hub programme, and on Connect to Work, and making sure that those really pay for young people in the county. We'll continue to build that infrastructure. We're very much strengthening our relationships between our own teams, other teams within the council, Department for Work and Pensions, and then of course employers who play a crucial role within this. So we work very heavily with the Growth Hub. We have a couple of roles that are now embedded into the Growth Hub to support employer engagement. We're also working heavily with the NHS around that health and wellbeing element, because that is absolutely one of the factors that is increasing youth unemployment, and we're starting to identify potential future models to expand our youth hubs. And then the one I'm most excited about, I suppose, is we're actually going to do a campaign. We're currently commissioning that around changing the message. I hate the word neat. I think it's awful. I also hate the word inactive. I think it's awful. If you are judged as that, I can only imagine how you feel. So we're doing something to flip the word NEAT, which will be out to employers, and it's called New Energised Emerging Talent. So we'll be running a massive campaign in the autumn to try to flip that, and hopefully that will align with the announcement of the jobs guarantee at the same time, and therefore we'll be able to get a number of our employers taking on those young people. So I'm going to pause at that point.
Thank you, Judy. Councillor Boatwright-Green.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points I just want to really flag at this point. First of all, massive thank you to Judy, because unfortunately for her, I've been asking a lot of questions about data, and also how that data is collected, and also how it's presented. I do think there is a genuine unfairness in kind of using some of the data that is there aimed at our young people, because actually we are, especially with the economically inactive, includes people like students, and actually that's incredibly unfair because they're spending money. I know I definitely did. So it's one of those where actually kind of classifying them as inactive I do think is a bit disrespectful. But also I would say that some of the data that we are using, it has been collected via kind of surveys that are actually using quite small numbers. So I do feel that this is possibly quite difficult when you actually bring it down to the degree to which that's actually quite useful. But I think it's the statistician in me. The second thing I'm increasingly frustrated by is this kind of disconnect between kind of typical kind of shire counties and also these combined authorities. I understand that the long-term plan from the government is to start moving us all towards combined authorities and mayoral regions. But when we're not in that situation, it's not as if that we actually have much of an option on this. So I think from a council perspective, it's something we do need to start thinking about how we push back slightly, because this is definitely going to have an impact on how we move these things forward. So I will say this is a team that's doing fantastic work with a very tight budget, and it is slightly frustrating to see what other authorities can then do as a result of these changes. So I welcome some of what the government's actually doing in this area, because obviously it is going to have an impact, but it's just a little bit frustrating to be sat there watching it happen elsewhere, and we at this time cannot connect into that. So that's obviously something we're going to have to be pushing quite hard on.
Councillor Kent.
Yeah, I wanted to come in this piece really because previous role, obviously, Judy was working with me, and I just wanted to pay credit to the amount of work and the effort she does with limited resources. She was always knocking on my door about the resources side, and I think it's a combination of grant begging and everything else as well, but she does a super job in a very difficult position with this. But I wanted to raise something that I think is absolutely critical, because I think the decisions that have been made by sequential governments really in terms of what we've done about youth education and opportunity is horrendous. I mean, look, everybody knows the story with me. I've got 3 kids. I've got one that went through a degree apprenticeship program that is doing better than you can ever believe. Own house, paid off, car at the age of 28. You know, no student debt, nothing really. Went into a sector whereby she was able to thrive because the business sector was ahead of where the universities would have been at that particular time in IT. I've got a son who went through COVID in university, so his last year was an absolute nightmare. Stayed on to do a master's. He's now got a level of debt that I wouldn't wish on anybody, to be perfectly honest. And my eldest daughter did an English degree. She's also an artist, and she's got a huge amount of debt as well. So that affects them moving forward in terms of their ability to borrow money for housing and everything else, and the thought that that is always sat there. And then we're faced with some very, very stark figures for Worcestershire. And I think what I wanted to draw attention to was the growth in youth unemployment over the last 18 months or 2 years, really. And we're talking about the figures that all of the areas are suffering, some more than most. And the worst ones, ironically, despite the numbers, is Bromsgrove, Redditch, and then Malvern Hills, which have seen close to a 20% growth in youth unemployment in 18 months. 20% of the kids haven't got a job. And I think that's absolutely stark. And I think the government has failed these children. They've failed their children. They haven't got the opportunities that are there to be able to do what they want to do. And I think we've got to look at very different ways of doing it. And the cost of employing young people, with the national insurance increases that we've seen, and the burdens on employers now, there's very much little differential between taking somebody on with experience and somebody with no experience. And as somebody that's taken on apprentices and actively supported it massively, it's not without its pain as a business owner taking on somebody that's never worked before. It's tricky. They can't get the phone out of their hand often. You know, you have to park it at the door, to be perfectly honest, and then watch the withdrawal symptoms. But if you work with these children and these kids, these young adults, then they can grow and they really do bring benefits. And I took one apprenticeship on now, and they're actually designing theme parks all around the world at a highest level of directorship. And every time I see this particular person post on LinkedIn, it gives me a huge amount of pleasure to think I took that person from Tesco's into a field that they actually wanted to go and gave them the opportunities to learn and do that. And I think we've got to think very, very carefully about what we've done. The government does have to change this sort of minimum wage element. I've got great difficulty. I mean, I went through, in my age, youth unemployment was horrendous, and we were talking about what would have been, it would have been like early 80s in terms of it. You just could not get a job. And I never thought I'd see that situation come back, and it has come back with a vengeance, and it is getting far worse. And we do have to accept that this is one of the biggest challenges that's facing us across the UK and as a council. And I think we've got to do as much as we possibly can to help Judy to address the local issues. But I think as councillors and politicians, we have to make it very, very clear that this can't go on. The government has to do something to make it more viable for employers to take young people on. And if that means getting rid of the minimum wage at a certain level, if you're in training and everything else as well, then just do it, because we cannot have these people out of work.
Thank you, Councillor Ken. And if I may, just picking up on your point about the 80s, I think the difference is that in the 80s, when there was a lot, what are you laughing at? I was still at school, obviously, you know. All right, calm down. Thank you, Councillor Birch. But the difference then is that, yes, there was very high unemployment, but it feels like that there was more of an appetite for people to work. Whereas now, the system that's been created, it seems that there doesn't seem to be the motivation for younger people to be in work. You know, and we see that you can have somebody that hands their notice in on a job without getting another one, whereas, you know, back then, you know, that was something that you'd never ever do. But something that was music to my ears to know that we're accurate and honest with our stats about what we're talking about within Worcestershire. But then as you went on, my question is, how is that then affecting us? Because we seem to be disproportionately against, obviously, you know, the shires versus the combined authorities. But are we being disadvantaged with any funding or any schemes that are in place because we're being honest with our stats?
Not because we're being honest, absolutely not. the NEET, so 16, 17-year-olds, and it's not really something I've talked about in this, there are many reasons why young people are NEET, and a lot of them are systemic issues, because actually one of the biggest issues is, so the way that the FE system works when you're post 16, and not all young people in Worcestershire obviously go into further education, but a significant proportion do, more go into FE than stay in school sixth forms. The way that the FE system works is you have kind of 42, 46, I can't remember the exact number, days of enrolment, essentially. And during that period of time, they look at, is this course right for this individual? Is this person on the right level? You know, is there sort of previous exam results, etc., reflecting who they are and what they do? And then they'll make adjustments. Most of the time, they'll make an adjustment, and that will be to put that young person onto a different course. But if that different course doesn't exist because they've had limited funding, then that young person becomes NEET. And then the issue with that young person is, even with the best will in the world, yes, they'll be directed to the Careers Worcestershire service, and that's absolutely something we're strengthening with the colleges. But even if they are, the ability that Charlotte then has to place that young person into a new education placement is really tricky, because there's just not enough available. It's not that there's not enough available placements. I have to be careful how I put these things. There are many available placements for full-time education, but they've missed the start point, so therefore they're already behind. There isn't any real short-term, short education programs that can support young people, and that's a lot to do with economic viability of the funding streams. So that's a bit of an issue. So often what you'll find is if a young person is NEET in November, they'll be NEET the following July as well. So you'll see a kind of, there's not a lot to be able to resolve their situation at that point other than kind of hang on. And then effectively it's the scarring that then comes with that period of time of being in that pool. And that's a nationwide problem currently that the government is tackling. And there are lots of pieces of work going into that, whether that's the role of schools and what should schools be doing about young people that don't have destinations, whether it's the role of colleges and how they should be picking up more of those young people. They're doing I'm trying to think what it's called. It's almost like a mandatory enrolment scheme. So if you don't have what we call a September guarantee, which is an offer of a place, you'll be mandatorily enrolled in a college. Not sure that's going to work, but that's the current premise of what they're currently working through, and that will be introduced. But also they're going through significant curriculum reform, and curriculum reform should mean that those young people who perhaps don't achieve particularly well in our schools are picked up in the further education system in a more effective way. But those are all things that are coming soon. So no, to answer your question, it's not because we're honest, it's because perhaps there just isn't enough. There's not enough availability of schemes to support 16 to 17-year-olds other than the signposting and the work that Charlotte's team can do, which is limited in that space.
And Councillor Boatwright-Green, I know that you want to answer that as well, but just still on, what do we do about the difference in appetite for work? That you do have a young person that might not turn up for work on the Friday without another job to go to on the Monday, which seems to have been a shift change. Is that the way that the benefit system is, that there's that, or what is the situation that you've got that change in appetite for work, or it doesn't seem to be that they're concerned to not have work?
I don't know if I agree, and that's my sort of initial response now looking at Charlotte, is because actually I think the majority of the young people that we see are motivated. They're coming in to see us because they want to move forward. It's not because they're being mandated by the job centre to be there. If that's the case, they just simply don't attend. And our attendance rates are really high in our programme. So I don't see that. I think there's an element of, I might feel the same. So the way that, and again, so many factors that are complicating the system, one of which is the way that we recruit people. So typically, almost picks up Councillor Taylor's point earlier about AI. One of the biggest impacts, in a sense, of AI is we kind of use AI to siphon people out of our recruitment process. So young people just aren't necessarily getting the opportunities that they were. I'm often sat in the youth hub and I hear some of the stories of the young people who are sat there. A couple of weeks ago I was there, And I was listening to this young gentleman telling his advisor what he'd applied for and how many applications. He was very, diligent. He had a list of every application that he'd made. He'd done something like 84 applications and he'd had responses from 5. I mean, I think I'd feel a bit after that and a bit unmotivated because the system people don't get back to people. And I mean, I'm sure we all know that ourselves. When you apply for a job, you don't necessarily hear back from them as to whether you've been successful or not. But that's the experience of many young people, and that's impacting them in terms of how they move forward. But I wouldn't say they don't come to us unmotivated. I would say they come with motivation. They may come with some challenges that we then seek to support them with. I don't know if, Charlotte, you've got any additional comment to add?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would agree. I'd say motivation within the hub is there. I think experience does impact that. I also think kind of the security of contracts has an impact of that within young people as well. So when you're looking at those 0-hour contracts, that can impact kind of commitment to that company. Because if they're told they're not needed and kind of lose their job within short notice, they're then coming back around the system. So we look for that sustainable outcome that and track that for 6 months beyond that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boatwright-Green.
The reason I was laughing was not because of the 80s, it was because I've, funnily enough, had this conversation recently with several young people. I think this is something that I could probably find a TV show in every decade where someone talks about the motivation of young people and how it's not like the good old days. And it was aimed at me when I was young. So it's one of those where the first thing I would say is that actually almost every young person I ever meet is incredibly motivated to work. And as a former teacher, one of the things I found incredibly frustrating was the fact that actually a lot of them, what they wanted was a part-time job so that they could actually learn some skills alongside their college work. And actually that's becoming harder and harder because of public transport and the lack of, and also the fact they are having to travel further. And I will say now that as somebody who has gone through a supermarket management scheme at 18, which was an interesting experience, actually that probably gave me a lot more skills, not just fridge management, than actually I was expected, and probably do pull on that even now. I think the big issue is that at the same time, if you decided at that October half term, so after those 5 weeks, and you're at an FE college, I actually don't want to do this, there was a way to bundle onto something in January. So there was actually courses where you could actually move on to something. So you could actually do something that for the rest of that year, and you would actually still learn something. And there is the potential to then move on to kind of jobs or even back into another FE programme. That, unfortunately, is not there to the same degree, and really there at all these days. And I remember those cuts when I was actually in education and watching those cuts come through. And that actually did contribute to that kind of issue with people not being in education and training. And as Judy has pointed out, that if people don't get that course right, it's almost like you get one shot and then it goes wrong for a year. And that's something that I think we do need to find a way to actually work with employers and work with educational establishments to try to avoid that happening. But last week, we also had colleges making very valid points about the fact that they actually really struggle to get the information they require about the young people coming onto their courses, and so that they can then provide the right support to get them onto those courses and then make sure that they are successful. And I think that's something that actually is a huge problem with the way in which we see our education system and then business and skills. There seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between kind of making sure those two things work together, which was one of the reasons why I was so keen to take the skills element on when asked to become cabinet member, because it's something that when I was actually in education, it's something I saw constantly, where a young person was being let down by the system, not really allowing that to happen. So I think there's a lot of dimensions to this one, but I would say the one thing I'll say about our young people, especially in Worcestershire, and having taught them, is they are incredibly engaged, they do want to be successful, and they actually do want to engage with employers. And I would be very minded to try to give them as much support as we can, rather than kind of to do that whole, but they leave a job. I will say this now, my personal experience is people my age are more likely to walk away from a job deciding that's it, I'm done, because generally speaking, they're in two people situations at home where there might be a bit of a buffer so they can walk away. But that's my own personal experience, and I'm sure others will be able to bring other experiences to the table.
Thank you. And no doubt there's a gap, I'm imagining, but the people that engage and the people that are maybe job hopping or having gaps in employment who aren't engaging because they don't, need to or whatever it may be. So, okay, brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So a short rant really for me first, if that's okay, and then I'll become more light-hearted just following that. Look, successive governments for me have always been reactive, not proactive when it comes to the youngsters, I think, and I've not seen any change in this recent administration. And you mentioned there that you've had a youth hub in Worcester since 2021. Yet I've known that Redditch, the young people in Redditch and the unemployment has been high and growing for a lot longer than that. And it's taken you, or the council, in this case, 2 more years, 2023, I think you said, to open or begin a youth hub in Redditch. So I think that could have been sooner, and I think that should have been looked at much sooner. And if you look at the north of the county, you also mentioned Wyre Forest, which is in a similar vein. But at least, it's an action that's been taken. So I have really 2 questions. And I'm not sure if you've got the answer to one of them, certainly. The rising youth unemployment in Redditch has gone from 6.65 to 8.27. Do we know why? And is the youth hub that you've now put in 2023, what has been the positive impact on that? Because, looking at this data, it hasn't had any positive, or if it has, it's been much slower than maybe you were expecting. And then on a slightly more light-hearted note, as I mentioned before this meeting to my colleagues in the panel, different areas across the county require different levels of skill. And, Redditch doesn't have a call for farriers and blacksmiths as being a slightly more urban part of the county than rural. So do you have a different strategy for different areas to encourage young people to take up apprenticeships and youth training? Thank you.
Okay, so to reflect on your first point, the reason there's when we first looked at a youth hub, we were asked by DWP to put 1 youth hub into Worcestershire. At the time, the numbers in Worcester City of actual young people versus the percentage was significantly higher. So that was the rationale. But also what I didn't say earlier is Malvern young people see their job centre advisor in Worcester. So we're kind of targeting both. But it also is a really accessible location for those in Wychavon. So when we put it there initially, it was because actually we knew that we could get, and we do, get young people from all areas of the county that will go to Worcester. And that was one of the reasons for the choice of location as well, in terms of the hive, because we do pick up a lot of young people from across the county. So that was the first premise. We at the time absolutely understood the challenge in Redditch, but the reality was, if we'd have put a youth hub in Redditch, yes, absolutely, I'm sure it would have addressed Redditch. However, it would have only addressed Redditch. So that was part of the rationale that DWP wanted to see, I suppose. We then spent probably from the opening of that youth hub talking to DWP and saying, we need this in Redditch, we need this in Redditch, we need this in Redditch. And it then took quite a significant period of time, including a number of high policy members from DWP coming to see what we were doing in Worcester to influence them to let us have a second youth hub. At that point, it was really unusual for a county to have more than 1. We were probably one of the first areas that had a youth hub. So most youth hubs, Charlotte and I, before we set up Worcester, went to visit a youth hub in Telford. Telford was seen as the exemplar. Telford's shut. We set it up really differently because actually we walked in and decided there were a lot of things we didn't like in the way that it was being run, and we knew we had to do it differently. We also know Worcestershire is incredibly different to Telford in what we were able to achieve. We needed to bring partners with us because we couldn't do it alone. So Telford shut, and I think the government only ever intended to fund youth hubs up to year 3. We're now in a year 5 funding discussion with them around Worcester City, which shows the success, and it is the only youth hub in the West Midlands that's in a year 5 situation. Most of the others closed. Redditch we then moved into. Redditch is actually it's a really successful youth hub. I absolutely agree with you. The way I would describe it is it's like having a bottle that you're trying to put the cork in, but you can't ever get the cork in because the water keeps coming out. And that's the Redditch scenario at the moment. So there are two things. One, I would say that we get 50% employment outcomes in Redditch. It's really strong. But yes, I appreciate you not seeing that in the figures. The secondary thing is that we actually have been looking at Redditch, and this year we've been to DWP to talk to them about additional resource for Redditch because we don't think it's enough. So we're putting an extra, I'm going to say 1.8 advisors into Redditch to really, which almost doubles. We had 2 in there previously, so we're putting an extra 1.8 in, and that's with the support of Redditch Borough Council. And also our own funds, because we recognise that's an area where absolutely we need to try to get to grips with this. The issue for me, I think, that we see in Redditch is a lot of young people travel north. And actually, if you look at the West Midlands employment rates, you will absolutely see the challenges that they're facing in youth unemployment as well. So I do think a lot of our young people are being dragged into that scenario. I think there's also been a number of closures of major organisations in Redditch that's impacting that. But what I would say is overall, we're making really good progress in Redditch. It's just a kind of watch this space, but remember my bottle that you can't get the cork in, because I think that's going to be the situation for a while. In terms of that different strategy in Redditch as well, we're also looking at, and this is our kind of approach to some of our other regions as well, rather than it being fixed in a hub, we're going to go outreach and put days out into various communities. And we will be doing that in Redditch, Bromsgrove and Wychhaven over the next 12 months. I think that answers your question.
Does that cover everything for you, Councillor Taylor, or have you got a second one?
I mean,
that was more
it covers it, but
light-hearted,
it's still disappointing that, with any investment we've made, the rate's still DWP, yeah. The rate is still rising, and the central government's got a lot to answer for. I know we can't do everything locally, but
what I would suggest is come and have a look at the youth hub, and you'll see the great work that's happening there. More than happy at any time for anyone to come and visit the youth hubs and talk to the team and talk to some and see some of the success stories for yourself. But yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. It is disappointing, but we'll get there.
Does that cover everything for you, Councillor Taylor? Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. As the only council on this authority that fits into your age demographic, I'd like to think I've got some sort of relevant experience. And I've got Emily with me today, who's on work experience. Now, look, I've been fortunate enough that since 16, I've always had a job or been in work, but a number of my friends haven't. I've got a friend who went and studied at Manchester Russell Group University for 3 years doing computer science and spent 6 months out of work looking for a job, applying London, Birmingham, Manchester. In the end, ended up at Malvern Science Park. So thankfully that was there for him. Another friend who's been looking for work and has ended up working 15 hours a week in Morrison's because that's the best that he can get at the moment. And somebody else who, as you've alluded to, is currently going through the job centre training scheme, trying to get licences to go and work on site as a labourer. Now, I've got some friends that have gone on to do really well and find really prosperous careers, but so many people who I went to school with, who I was educated with, just simply can't find work. And speaking to some of the businesses that I have around my area, the things that are coming back are all linked to exactly what Councillor Kent has said about the cost of employing these young people. The average cost, they say now, with the on-cost is around £33,000 to employ an 18-year-old. And what they're saying is, spoke to the Regal Seminar in Evesham and cafes within Droitwich, they're employing people who are semi-retired because they're more reliable in their eyes, they've got more experience, and they end up staying for a little bit longer, they tend to end up having that loyalty, and for the same cost. So why would you employ an 18, 19-year-old with no relevant experience when you can employ somebody at the other end of that scale? Because people are taking semi-retirement earlier and people aren't then getting their state pension until 67. So there is then that 10-year gap where they're then taking on these other opportunities. And the businesses just aren't employing. I'm involved at the moment in trying to get a jobs fair set up in at Pershore College. It's taking place at the end of this month. we've reached out to hundreds of businesses, and some of the largest local employers that we've got, some of the food manufacturers in Evesham, warehouses, companies that for years were the biggest employers of young people, are saying they're either not recruiting or they're going through redundancy schemes because there simply isn't the money that they can continue to invest. So I think it's really good what you're doing as a team and all the schemes that you're putting in place. But quite frankly, writing a CV and getting young people in a position where they're ready to work is only half the battle, because quite frankly, the jobs just aren't out there, and you can't magic up this level of experience. These employers just aren't taking on people my age because we don't have that length of tenure that they're looking for. We can't get the foot in the door to be able to get that first job to gain that experience. And quite frankly, the jobs are going where there are jobs, which are obviously shrinking at the moment, particularly in industries like hospitality, which were renowned for employing young people, are going to those at the other end of life. So it's a bit of a broad point, really. But from your point of view, all the work that you're doing, is it almost falling on deaf ears when you can't get the employers, or the employers, no matter how much they want to, aren't able to engage back with getting these young people into work?
So this is one of the reasons that we're doing the NEAT campaign. But in my area of the council, a lot of our work streams are interlinked. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment on supporting employers to have the what we'd call healthy and inclusive workplaces. And as part of that, we challenge those companies to support young people. That scheme has now got 108 employers on board, and what Charlotte's team are kind of utilising that scheme for is finding some of those opportunities and what we call carving those jobs. So they're not necessarily advertised jobs. We talk to those companies about the young people that we have, and that's what's providing some success. But then alongside that, as I mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of work over the last probably 2 years really to work with the Growth Hub. And we now have embedded advisors into the Growth Hub who are essentially, one of the questions that any Growth Hub advisor will ask at the start of a business engagement will be, tell us about your recruitment. Are you recruiting? Tell us about your workforce. And previously that conversation didn't go anywhere, it didn't lead anywhere. And now that conversation is, okay, tell us about your vacancies. Okay, can we help you with that? And we're then feeding that not just into our own programmes, but also into the wider employability partners in the county. So those that are working with, I don't know, over 50s or 25 to 65-year-olds as well, to see if we can fill some of those vacancies for those employers. I think it's a tricky balance. Of course, yes, a lot of employers are in a difficult environment at the moment, but the outcomes that we are having are showing that employers will recruit, and particularly on Connect to Work, where that employer will be given support to, and that individual will be given support. We see those sort of placements, they typically tend to be more successful. So yeah, I would say we are doing a lot, whether it's enough, and I do think there is appetite from a lot of employers, but I think absolutely there are some that are right now. What I will say is if you employ an apprentice, you don't pay national insurance, so it's always something to think about.
Very good link there. An advert for Councillor Boatwright-Green.
So first of all, I'll say I'm now old enough to have lived through a pandemic and an economic crisis. Although to be fair, you don't need to be that old to do that these days. And actually, in terms of kind of the way in which kind of employment has kind of gone over the last kind of 20 years, I can say that it has definitely been, I'm seeing patterns at this point, which is depressing because they seem to be moving a lot quicker than they say did in the 40 years previously. I also have some work experience with me today as well, because we do have young people who are thinking about their future and they are kind of thinking, right, how is it that I actually get those skills I need to make sure that I can then get employed? But what I would also say is that there are a lot of employment opportunities at the moment that actually kind of employers are saying, look, these are the skills we want and this is how we want to kind of get those skills for you. And they actually can see that opportunity, because if you invest in somebody and they can see that you're investing in them, then they will actually want to stay. And so I can say this now, I've got friends who've never left businesses that they joined at 21 or 19, or even in the case of one of them 14, and actually they have kind of worked their way through. obviously not all of us are going to do that, and I'll be the first to admit I haven't. And actual building those skills to then move between jobs is also incredibly important as well. But what I would say with all of this is that we need a marketplace that is fairer. And I think at the moment for young people, that's not what's there. It is quite limiting, and also trying to get to these jobs is quite difficult. And yes, we do have many businesses going through a lot of challenging times at the moment. But what is really quite difficult at the moment is that kind of link between what's happening in schools, getting that work experience, and then getting onto the right training and then onto the right career path that works for you. Because I'm hearing a lot of people at the moment saying, well, I went down this path because it's what I could access, not necessarily because what I wanted to do. And so we do need to think about exactly what it is that we want this marketplace to look like. Because yes, if someone wants to go into IT, I can probably find them a job. If someone wants to go into the kind of food market in some way, shape or form, I can probably find that job. But if someone wants to go into geological engineering, for instance, they're going to have to start thinking about how far away they're going for that, despite the fact that we have quarries and we have opportunities in the county. So there's a lot of joining up here that needs to happen. But I will say that I know keep hearing DWP being mentioned. We do have a massive disconnect between what the national government is kind of providing for us and actually what young people do need. I will say this service is actually trying to fill that gap and actually is doing a very good job. We just need more of it, which is where we do need to get the DWP to hand over some more of their delicious cash.
Thank you, Councillor Kent.
As ever, I sit here and listen to what people put forward and plot and work out schemes and try and work out how we can help with this. Because it's one thing to say it's a problem. The other thing is, how do we fix it? Well, you won't be surprised to hear that I was regarded quite early on as pretty unemployable, you know, in terms of in a job. And I've never really lasted working for anybody, and I cannot understand why, really. But so I embarked on a career of self-employment right from a very early age. And I think this is something we're missing here. So I've just been doing a bit of research while the panel's been discussing this. And it came up, an Enterprise Nation report came up actually that said that 48% of UK 18 to 24-year-olds are considering becoming entrepreneurs. Yeah, and other surveys put openness to self-employment among 16 to 24s as high as 73%. Now, some of the things put forward today are very valid reasons as to why employers won't take on young people. But they don't stop young people starting their own careers. So I've just been chatting to Gary while people have been speaking, and I think we could do something with the Growth Hub, perhaps talk to Dan and Judy, and see if we could actually launch maybe a half day or something to gauge interest using the Growth Hub and Malvern Hills Science Park, Beta Den and those capabilities with startup things. There is the King's Trust Enterprise Programme as well, which will help, and there's also startup loans available at low levels to try and get youngsters enabled. We could tell them how to set a company up, we can explain to them how to operate self-employed, we can see what they're interested in and perhaps try and take some of these. It won't obviously appeal to all of them, but I think let's develop that as an idea and see if we can come up with something with Gary, Judy and Dan whereby we can actually go and do something about it, because that would address the value element. Because if you're self-employed, you're working for what you earn. Yeah, and you're not demanding £33,000 a year to go to work, because I'm sure many of them, if they can earn an amount anywhere near that through a self-employed basis, then that's what they want to do. So I'm going to take that away. You can take that as an action point, and we'll see if we can do something about it.
Thank you. Judy, do you want to come in?
I was just going to say we do quite a lot in this space already. So we already work with the King's Trust quite significantly, and also the BIPC, and we do link young people into the Growth Hub schemes, and we've done work with Beta Den in the past. But yeah, absolutely, there's always more we can do, so we're always happy to have a look at that. And I forgot to say to Councillor Birch, perhaps you should send your friends into one of our hubs.
They could be like the mystery shopper, couldn't they? Councillor Birch, back to you.
Absolutely, and you know, Councillor Kate is right again. You know, when I was during COVID, post-COVID, I was on a 0 hours contract, so I just stopped getting hours. You know, the place wasn't open; they don't have to pay me, and that's what I did. I went self-employed. We started doing landscape gardening, and we started off. We weren't very good at it. We got better towards the end, but we had no real business support when it came to setting that up. You sort of figured it out as you went along. You learned how to do the books. You learned what was coming in. We were priced wrong to start with, and you figure that out as you go along. We could have made more money had we possibly had that support from the start, because we knew then where we were going with it. But I just wanted to come back onto the financial side of things, that £33,000 number. Now, obviously, that's increased. The cost of employing a young person has increased. It is my belief, and I appreciate this as an opinion and not necessarily a fact, that the more it costs to employ somebody, the less enticing it is for a business. The businesses are out there to make a profit. They're going to make a profit. That's what they need to do. So they're not going to employ somebody completely out of goodwill. They take on apprenticeships because they know it's a good thing to do, but that will only go so far. They obviously still need to be able to make money. Have you noticed any change in the attitude of business and the willingness for business to take on young people since these additional costs have come into place, since the cost of employing young people has risen to a level where it is less enticing and financially beneficial for a company to have somebody that's 18 as opposed to 57?
I think it varies dependent on companies. Just a point that you mentioned earlier, I think the job fair type of approach to employment has changed. We don't see businesses recruiting lots of people. It's about relationships that we have with those employers. We're looking at SME market now rather than the kind of large scale recruitment, and leaving somebody to kind of come to one of our events for the whole day we aren't seeing the best return for that. So we try and adapt the approach for businesses based on the timing they're recruiting. Their experience varies. In any age, you'll have different kind of staff members that bring different challenges, different skill sets, and we see that within young people. Different businesses have different skills they need, and I think for us it's just about really demonstrating that we've got businesses coming back to us to say, this has been a great experience, can we utilise that again? And I think it's demonstrating that to other employers when that works. Of course, I think the economic impact is difficult in growth of recruitment anyway, and I do take your point about the skill set. But I think we also need to challenge that if we don't invest in that now, where are we going to be in 10 years with that kind of increasing problem? So that's something that we're having the conversation. I had that conversation this week with an employer, and I think hopefully seeing the schemes that are coming up around the youth guarantee, that will be more incentives that we can kind of demonstrate are working for that support.
Thank you. Councillor Price?
Thank you, Chair. I think today we've spoken a lot about the government, the pros and the cons of what they're doing, and also employers. The thought occurred to me a few minutes ago, the council's an employer. So what do we do in terms of apprenticeships and supporting youth unemployment within Worcestershire? And I've got a few follow-up questions afterwards as well.
Okay, so I'm going to caveat this with, it's not my area, but I obviously do know. So the council does employ apprentices. As you would expect within my own service, we actively employ apprentices because I like to practice what I preach. And the council does do that. The council is I think it's something that kind of goes through peaks and troughs in terms of where we are with it. But at the moment, I would say it's one of those things I think we have to be mindful as we go into local government reorganisation, not to just say, oh, we're not going to do this, or, oh, that's really difficult. I think we need to absolutely continue to employ young people into the council. It's absolutely one of our, or it should be one of our succession plans into teams. There isn't necessarily any targeting, I don't think, across the council. And I think it's very much where you've got different departments that have had good experiences, they continue to do it. But we definitely went through a phase where the question was, when you wanted to recruit, could you recruit an apprentice? We no longer have that question. So, I think it's ad hoc, but absolutely something I would support anyone getting on the bandwagon with, to encourage across all councils. And again, the district councils are good at this as well. We absolutely do it. The question of whether we could do more, I think, is something I would suggest may need to be asked.
Thank you. And if I could just pick that up on a district perspective, certainly in the areas that we find it hardest to recruit. So, for example, at Wychavon for planners, we're very successful with actually getting people onto apprenticeships, and they are then our most committed and experienced officers as we go forward. So it most certainly works from a business point of view and the person that's on the apprenticeship, because it creates those committed positions that people can stay in. But back to you, Councillor Bryce, for your next question.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with all your points. I think when you look at the county's apprenticeship programme, it doesn't go far enough. So I paid a visit to Worcester Sixth Form College while I was CMR for Highways. And talking to the principal Ed Senior, he didn't really know that we did an apprenticeship programme, which is quite disappointing really, because we were talking about highways, finance, IT, and I was quite disappointed. So I came back to Wildwood, had a conversation with some of the guys, and to find out that we do quite a few apprenticeship programmes within the directorates was quite good to see. I think the County Council also working in partnership with the districts, going into local government reorganisation, we could really create something special here in terms of helping the youth unemployed and also apprenticeships, and also show national government that local government can actually step up and actually help with these numbers. I think additionally, when you look at structured graduate programmes, we don't offer one of those either. You've got University of Worcester right on your doorstep. You've got a business school there. You know, offering something for those young individuals would be really impactful as well. And I really think, you know, I would challenge the new cabinet to actually come forward with an enhanced apprenticeship programme and looking at a graduate scheme as well.
Councillor Boatwright-Green.
So first of all, I look forward to finding the previous Cabinet's scheme and then looking at what they've done there and then building upon that. I'll be really keen to move that one forward. As a previous employer of Worcester Sixth Form College, what I would say is that actually we had a large number of students who would go on to apprenticeships, but I will say it was very subject based. So as someone who was actually in the geology department or ran the geology department, bridge building was where I used to send a lot of mine to. So they used to go on to higher apprenticeships in that area. We had a really strong relationship with the college in Solihull. And so what we used to do is we had a lot of young people who didn't really want to go to university at that point. So it was where we built relationships, actually with one of our engineering teams, actually, who were affiliated with the county as well. Unfortunately, with these, what tends to happen is it tends to be driven by those who are in the building because of their expertise. And this is something that I'd be really keen to try to avoid, where once someone steps away from somewhere and they move on, that then starts to fade and move away. Because that's a real problem we have, not just in employers, but also in education, where when someone is driving something forward, they leave, and unfortunately that driver then starts to be lost. And what we really need to do is start working with educational establishments and with businesses to make sure that those ties are deeper, so that when someone does move on, we don't end up losing those ties. But I will definitely say within the council, absolutely apprenticeships will be something we'll be looking at. And I'll be really keen to look at what's been done over the last 12 months so we can make sure that we build on that and we don't lose that obvious energy that's been put in over the last 12 months.
Thank you. Councillor Price, do you have a further question?
I think just a piece of advice, rather than concentrating on what's happened in the last 12 months, how about we work moving forward for the benefit of the children and the youth in employment, and come and formulate a plan?
Yeah, I'll allow Councillor Boatwright-Green to answer that, but if you could concentrate on the further question that you've got. Councillor Boatwright-Green.
I assume the question came from a place of genuine wanting to move something forward that you've already been working on, and I was saying I would absolutely love and welcome moving that forward.
Do you have any further questions, Councillor Price?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, sitting here listening to a lot of this, I think it may come as a shock to a lot of people with regards to the amount of effort that's going in. Obviously, communication is everything. And we have got a situation that we can't control in terms of the economy. One of my questions was going to be with regards to the situation of the government's plans coming in and the lack, as you highlighted to us today, the lack of transparency really between our position and the government position and what we would do there, because it does appear from reading the report that we're quite a flagship really in many of these areas. I'm sure the government took a lot of the thoughts that have developed here, but now with the government putting their plans in place, we're going to lag behind because of this council, with Shire-led councils, exactly as we've mentioned there. So I'm hoping that we can take some view and perhaps look at what's happening there and get ahead of the game with that. But that wasn't a question now, because I've heard what you've said. One of the questions I would raise is at point 40, 49 and 50, you're making a point there that there's a sustained decline in intermediate apprenticeships, which have caused a problem. You then go on to point 50 where that's been recognised to some degree. So what are we doing about the other areas where there's been a decline there? And that's the question really. in those intermediate apprenticeships?
I haven't covered that yet. That's part two.
I was trying to keep up.
Do you want to hold that, Councillor Edmonds, until
Yes,
because we're going to go on to the apprenticeships unless you think that we've already incorporated it into this. Yeah. So is everybody okay that if we move on to the apprenticeships?
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Yeah. Is that okay? Or did you have another question?
No,
Councillor
the
Edmonds,
question
on?
before that. We have talked about apprenticeship to some degree, but perhaps not, as we're going to be alluded to now. Okay, that's fine.
Is that okay for you, Councillor Edmonds? You haven't got another question on the...
No more questions.
Okay,
here.
excellent. So, Judy, shall we move over to the apprenticeships, but bearing in mind, obviously, that we've still talked, in the round quite a bit anyway. So, over to you.
Okay, so apprenticeships. And I think just reflecting on one of the points earlier, what I'm going to say is apprenticeships can be a number of things, and they don't necessarily support youth unemployment. A lot of apprenticeships are aimed at upskilling people. And so therefore it is important to remember that in the context of some employers who will say, oh yes, we're really active apprenticeship employers. You might be, but you're employing, he's going to bring one over to you.
Oh, it's so funny. You've just disappeared. I've just opened this. Sorry.
So you've thrown me now. So in the context of people that say, yes, we're really active apprenticeship employers, my second question would be, how old are your apprentices? Because they don't necessarily mean that they're employing young people. It could be that they're upskilling. And that's absolutely something you'll see. So Worcestershire so when I came into working for Worcestershire County Council way back when in 2013, one of the sort of agendas I was given at the time was to look at kind of some of this, that we recognised that apprenticeships were a really good way of keeping talent in Worcestershire. We had a sort of challenge in the numbers of young people that left Worcestershire and didn't necessarily come back until they were kind of close to retirement age. And we wanted to keep some of that talent. So at that point, we kind of thought about what could we do to work more effectively in the apprenticeship space. So we created the Worcestershire Apprenticeship brand. In terms of data, what I would say is since I've actually got the figures in front of me, but since 2018, 2019, when I would say we used to have just over 4,000 apprenticeships every year. And we're now, this last academic year, so 24-25, the data is very lagged in apprenticeships. We have 3,790 apprentices, and that's only 280 less than 18-19, which is when we kind of had our peak. A lot of things happened at that time which impacted apprenticeships, and then we had the change in the way that the government looked at apprenticeships. So they took them from being vocational areas and made them more job specific. So they're now called standards. So you become a business administrator. You don't study business administration. You become a maintenance engineer. You don't study engineering and manufacturing. And that was the main difference they introduced at that point. They also introduced the levy. And the levy took, in Worcestershire, a lot of time for people to get their heads around it, based on the fact that we probably didn't have a significant number of levy payers, and they were trying to kind of figure out how to utilise the levy, how to carry the administration burden, because there absolutely is one that goes with being a levy payer, and then how our SMEs connected into that picture. The COVID pandemic really impacted our numbers, as you probably would have expected, because actually when you're social distancing, it's fairly hard to mentor someone. But also, as we talked about earlier, work from home became a thing, and that just didn't necessarily work well in the apprenticeship space. So we did have an impact, and over time, we've recovered that position to where we are today. I'm always really proud of the fact that we've spent that time being very much focused on 16 to 24-year-olds. We've made that our deliberate focus. We can't stop the growth of 25 and overs and the growth of higher apprenticeships because that just happens in the background. But we remain talking about 16 to 24-year-olds. So in terms of programmes, as I've mentioned, Worcestershire has its Worcestershire Apprenticeships Programme. So what is that? It started off and it was, like everything, it was a helpline, and it's all about giving impartial advice and guidance to parents, young people, teachers, employers, etc. And it remains, we still have that helpline element to it today, but it's also a much wider programme now. So that wider programme evolved to be an events programme. So we run events for young people to encourage them to consider apprenticeships, and we do that as part of our early careers programme. But we also run our big celebration awards every November. It's absolutely an event to come to if you've not been. It really does celebrate the success of apprenticeships, and you know, it's fantastic to see a lot of the young people winning awards and being recognised for the contributions that they make, as well as some of our employers being recognised. We also have a big marketing campaign around Worcestershire Apprenticeships. I have to say it is mainly on Instagram, which I had to look at Charlotte to remember, which suggests how much I'm an Instagram user. But Instagram and TikTok, which I definitely don't use. But it's because of the audience that it's targeted at, but we also use LinkedIn, etc., to get some of that business messaging over. With the investment that the council put in a couple of years ago, that's allowed us, because apprenticeships prior to that could be seen as a labour of love of Judy Gibbs probably, and it was always something I wanted to keep going. So until we had that team in place to really move it forward, it was always something that was kind of an extra on my role. With that investment, we created a single application portal, because one of the challenges in apprenticeships is how do you find an apprenticeship? So in theory, every training provider should register their apprenticeship on the national government website. However, in practice, that doesn't always happen. And sometimes what happens is they register bulk vacancies. So again, not necessarily every vacancy is put on there. So a lot of young people will think, well, where's that? I don't want to apply for that. But actually it might be a really exciting opportunity underneath it. So the system in terms of applications isn't that simple. But the Worcestershire Apprenticeships service helps young people see the wood through the trees. So we work with approximately 200 young people a year through that. And we do that with the Training Providers Association, which is a network of different training providers from FE, Independents and HE, who are all offering apprenticeships. And the creation of that single application process was designed to kind of let a young person could fill in the form once, but it would put applications into all of the different organisations that were offering apprenticeships in that area and enable them to then talk to that young person. So it wasn't where it was before, which was that if you apply to Heart of Worcestershire College, for instance, you're kind of put onto Heart of Worcestershire College's application system. They will then look for employers that match your needs and vice versa. But if an employer never comes along, then you're almost kind of put on a little bit of a shelf, whereas this enabled more of a sort of clearing process. But it also meant that those that weren't successful, we could pick up and work with. So we should say as well that Worcestershire Apprenticeships have regular appointment slots in the hubs. So if a young person says, I'm interested in apprenticeships, I really want to pursue that, rather than, yes, absolutely, we will support them, but we will also bring in that expertise to support them. So we offer a proactive engagement programme into schools as well. And I'd say I often wonder if we've been a victim of our own success in that, because we see about 20,000 young people in schools from years 7 to 11 every year. And that's great, but actually are we kind of encouraging some of those that perhaps wouldn't have thought about those routeways to the detriment of those that perhaps those routeways might have been more successful for? We don't know. So we've been doing this for 10 years, as I said, and just to show you some numbers around the account programme, we also are really lucky at that point, as perhaps when the council was in a slightly different position to today, and we were able to give every young person that applied for an apprenticeship a bursary. Sorry, not applied, were successful in an apprenticeship a bursary. So we would give them a £250, well done for getting your apprenticeship, and then £250 based on expenses that they had, because often they need equipment, transport can be an issue in the early days in terms of the costs of that, and that all enabled their apprenticeships to be more successful. So we supported 945 young people to apply for over 1,700 applications, and over 370 of those have been successful and are claiming bursaries. So that programme does come to an end. I think it came to an end at the end of March, but we're continuing to fulfil the bursaries for those that are on the programme until the start of the academic year. I put a section in here about the challenges of engaging employers, because I actually, this is really relevant. But I think one of the other things with the challenges in the apprenticeship landscape is also about capacity, because whilst an employer might say, yes, absolutely, I'd like 20 apprentices, the question then becomes, do we have a training provider that can work with that organisation and has 20 places? And certainly in engineering and manufacturing, we quite often go through this loop of capacity issues, where we've had, unfortunately not this year, but certainly last year, we were in a position where we could have offered significantly more engineering and manufacturing apprenticeships, but we have our only outstanding apprenticeship provider in the county, based in Worcester, is an engineering manufacturing specialist, and they just simply don't have enough space. They absolutely have the will, but the way that the DfE work is they invest capital funds predominantly into further education before they'll invest them into anyone else. So it's almost impossible to get money to expand your premises, and that's what constrains them. I mean, they suggest that they should be able to do that through the contributions they're getting back from employers, but in reality, it's probably not going to happen. So that's part of the sort of challenge of this picture. So not only employers and the system they face, of course, we go through phases where I would say to you, oh yeah, we've got loads of employers, no young people. We are absolutely in a situation where we have lots of young people and not enough employers. But I do think part of that picture has been driven by capacity as well as employer appetite. I did put in here about national minimum wage. Absolutely, it's an impact. National apprenticeship wage is currently £8, I believe. But yeah, yet again, I like to point out on every possible opportunity that you don't pay national insurance when you have an apprentice. And I'd like to think that's a significant incentive for an organisation facing financial challenges. In terms of the government's response, because there is one in this space, the government is currently bringing in incentives for employers. And actually, we're really lucky in certain areas of the county, in Wychavon and Malvern, they also offer apprenticeship bursaries for employers. So when what we call stacked, so if you employ a 16 to 18-year-old and you're in an SME and that young person hasn't worked for a period of time, potentially you can get a nice incentive of about £5,000. If you happen to be in Wychavon and Malvern, you can top that up by another £1,500, which potentially really takes quite a lot of that. I think I worked it out yesterday, and it's kind of about 15,000 in terms of their actual salary. So if you can take out kind of 6,000-7,000 of that, then it's quite a good offer. So when we have the detail on that rollout and where we can get those finances for and how we can make that work, we'll absolutely be looking at that. One thing I haven't mentioned is the changes to apprenticeships. So the government has introduced something called foundation apprenticeships. The foundation apprenticeship is for someone who perhaps didn't get their English and maths and perhaps needs to do a bit more of a building block. Typically it's shorter, so it's about 9 months in duration. There is a question of economic viability with the providers and whether this is something that they can deliver. But I think the big question is, if you're an employer and I say to you, would you like a foundation apprentice or an apprentice? The answer would be, why would I have a foundation apprentice when I can pay an apprentice the same wage? Although we are looking at a scheme for construction employers, because we find that a lot of construction employers, particularly want to employ family members who actually may not be at the right entry level requirements to go on to an apprenticeship. So this could work really well in that space. So we are looking at that as a particular area to roll out. We have a number of so the other thing to talk about is the modularisation of apprenticeships. So as part of the growth and skills levy reforms, the government are modularising apprenticeship units. So an employer can use an apprenticeship unit to upskill staff. That's probably as much detail as I can give you at this point. I know the first ones are about AI that they're rolling out, and not 100% sure how well they'll be taken up in the county. And I think when they shorten it or modularise it, sounds perfect, but from a provider perspective, it's really challenging to staff and deliver because they're used to these one-year models, not these roll-on, roll-off in that way. So it does become challenging. But yeah, lots of work in this space, lots of positives. But as always, I think the answer is yes, absolutely. We could do more if we had more to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Boatwright-Green.
I pretty much would say here that Judy's pretty much summed it up. It very much is the Judy show when you talk about apprenticeships. It's very detailed, very thorough. I will say from my experience last week, a meeting where there was a large number of employers actually there, they are incredibly enthusiastic about trying to get on board with trying to provide as much as they can. But I do think the modular side of this is really causing quite a lot of grief for the employees who did want to speak to me, is that actually how exactly they do deliver that was something that was really concerning them. So I think it is something that we do need to try and consider in the medium term to make sure that they are able to do this thoroughly.
Councillor Kent, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think obviously it was quite funny when you distributed this, because I was actually looking in on it following Councillor Price's comments, really, because obviously I was involved in being at the event and celebrating the apprenticeship awards and everything else, and the hundreds of companies involved and the different groups from education and also the businesses, because there's quite a raw cheer there when some of the businesses are winning those awards. So I think we've done a huge amount. I think you're talking about 50,000 apprentices, was it, over that period of time in Worcestershire. I think we've all heard what the problems are. I think, you know, what we've got to do is, I suppose, taking a little bit of what Councillor Price has said on board, is work out what we can actually do about it within the remit that we've got now. Because it's all well and good for us to complain about what the situation is, but I think we've got to try and find other ways to skirt around the system to try and make sure that we get as many of these young people into work as we can and help through the difficulties we've got. We've talked about what we'll try and do with the entrepreneurship and businesses and work with what Judy's done already and see if we can come up with a couple of things and perhaps run it as a pilot and see if it works. And I think those types of things are the things that are going to address it. But I think we have done great work. On a limited budget, I do understand that, which is the biggest problem that we face within the council now, but let's see what we can do moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel? Nothing at all. Councillor Edmonds, was your question answered? Okay, excellent.
Can I just respond to that? Because I didn't mention, one of the things to talk about, so because of the changes in apprenticeships, it's difficult to see whether it's the changes that have impacted the intermediate numbers. Because one of the things the government did, which was really interesting, was they removed the standard for business administration. So if you take the council as an example, we had significant numbers of young people coming into the council on business administration. But when that was removed, we kind of had to put a bit of a round peg in a square hole. And we've been doing this in Charlotte's team, where we've kind of been using customer service, but they're not really customer service people. But we've made it work. But I think doing that, it was such a route way into so many businesses that's one of the biggest dramatic impacts on intermediate. I'm very pleased to tell you it's coming back because they've seen the error of their ways and it's coming back. So I'd like to think that picture will improve. But ultimately, obviously, you need a building block. So you need to be able to do intermediate to progress to advanced. You can't always just go in straight to advanced. But there are also more challenges in SMEs delivering some of the requirements around some of the intermediate standards. They've been written by big businesses, and therefore all the standards are now written in a collaboration way between employers and the government teams. And yeah, they've been written by big businesses who perhaps have a bigger breadth of environment for a young person to study within. So often there are some that can become difficult for us to deliver locally. However, I'd like to think some of that picture will change. So watch this space, business admin, we've got a lot of money riding on that.
Okay, fantastic. And thank you all. I think really the takeaways for us all, for both Cabinet members, very much Councillor Boatwright-Green is on the transition from education, and you're covering that piece. But I think it's also, you know, getting... understanding what that gap is, and whether it's that somebody, you know, needs to go into an apprenticeship, whether, and what support. Obviously there's the support there once they're in that situation, but it's having that transition. And the thing that a couple of you have mentioned about when somebody ends up on the wrong course, and you said about the college not expecting the people, but then is it, you know, are we educating people enough about what course it is, and so that people are actually going on the right course because they're really motivated to go on that course, and that's what fits the bill for them. So whether we can do something on that. And certainly as far as businesses are concerned, yes, we're doing a lot of work, and particularly around apprenticeships, but I think there's a gap there to be had to communicate with businesses to know what is available, certainly in respect of, you know, the fact that you can take an apprenticeship for 15,000 and you're going to have 6,500 potentially off that. So I think certainly from a business point of view, and particularly the SMEs, because yes, we might go out to large employers, but there's a lot of businesses, small businesses across the county that probably don't necessarily know about the apprenticeships. Is there anything else, panel, that I've missed that we want to take forward? Okay, fantastic. Thank you all very much. Thank you for that. So we'll just now go on to the work programme, item 7. Is there anything that members of the panel want to move forward or add to the work programme overall? No? Councillor Birch?
No, quite happy with the connectivity item. I know that it's been raised previously. It's quite, a prominent issue, I think, across certain areas of the county.
Okay, so we're happy to leave the immediate work programme as it is, yeah? Okay, excellent. Thank you all very much. Just the next meeting, as you'll know from the email, has been moved to the 6th of July, which I believe is okay with everybody apart from Councillor Allen, but it's all okay with you all, yeah? Excellent. Thank you all very much.